The following program does not have a normal intro because I was really too busy smoothing other things over to get it done. So, Ori? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the following program. I'm your host, Joe Neiman, aka Good Lawgic, also known as Viewer's Discretion, because I was very torn walking into this. I was like, it's Monday, which that's supposed to be a following program, but it's like still like a holiday day. It's like, no one's working today except for me. So isn't that supposed to be like a weekend kind of thing, which is Viewer's Discretion? It's a very tough call. I ended up leaning in toward following program. Still not sure I made the right call on that though. I can be persuaded. I'm not going to be obstinate about this one. But for now, we're going to call it the following program. I also want to start with an apology. So tonight's episode of whatever is starting with an apology. And how often does that happen? Not very. So the apology is to those of you who follow me on locals at goodlogic.locals.com. That's goodlogic.locals.com, because I take pride, deep pride, in the fact that I am very meticulous to always update my locals community when I make an appearance somewhere. It's like a big thing to me, because I'm like, that's the reason people who are not, paying members, that's the reason they sub up, so they can get notifications like where they can find me. And on Saturday night, so I got a DM from one of my locals folks letting me know about this debate that was happening on Destiny's channel. And I was like, oh, I really want to get in on that. But it's like, so I went into that. I'm watching the debate, and I was like, this is so aggravating. Oh my gosh. I was listening to two leftists where one of them was trying to basically stand into the shoes of MAGA and try to figure out what possible arguments would Trump make. What possible arguments could he possibly make? And it's like, and half the time it's like, yeah, I'm at a loss on this one. I got no idea what he could possibly say against that. And I was like, are you joking? Are you kidding me? This is insane. And I was like yelling. I was like, let me in there. So someone in the chat mentioned that Destiny said that if I'll pop into his general voice on Discord, which is where he was hosting this whole thing. I don't know. It was on YouTube. It was on Discord. I don't know. I'm still confused about the whole thing because I found it on YouTube myself. I'm going to be sharing a YouTube video. But when I go to Destiny's channel, I can't even find this. The whole way that he runs his whole Discord thing is chaos. Now, I grant you, okay? I get it. I'm a boomer. I don't understand these things, whatever. It is chaos. There's channels here. There's channels there. I don't even know what the heck is happening. I'm bouncing from this channel to this channel, and I'm using my phone for this. So I'm bouncing to that channel, and there's an art channel, there's a science channel, there's a general channel, there's a, I don't know, tribe members channel. He has so many freaking channels, and people, God bless them, people in like every one of these channels just chatting away there, and I'm like, I don't even know where the hell I'm supposed to go here. This is like so stupid. So I popped into one channel where it looked like there was like 25 people in there. And all of a sudden the audio that I was listening to, I could hear like the audio feed. It sounded different. And I was like, am I in? I don't even know if I'm in. I think I might be in. I think he brought me in. I'm not sure. And I didn't have my headphones on, which is probably a mistake. My audio in this is terrible. I also was fighting off a cold when this happened, but I think I acquitted myself rather nicely. And I think you guys will enjoy the debate because it was a very, very spirited debate, which I felt like my locals audience would really appreciate. I did find my glasses like 20 minutes ago. So if you were worried about that, I do have them. So I was like, you know what? It was over like an hour of me debating. I was like, I could totally review that because a lot of it, I'm flying by the seat of my pants there. I don't even know what argument's coming next. I'm just sitting there and I'm just sort of responding to what's coming in there. But there probably is a lot of feedback that I would have when I have the benefit of actually hosting a review of it myself. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do. I was like, you know what? It's not a bad thing. Oh, thank you. I was looking everywhere for it. I was checking my pants pocket because I always keep in my back left pants pocket my money. And I was like, I don't see that $5 Barracuda. What the heck is this? This is crazy. But thank you. Appreciate you. You're a good man for honoring that. Okay. So without further ado, hey, Shadow Falls. Yeah, that's me peeking in on Rumble. Doing a quick peek over at Locals. I don't know if Locals is working. I don't think Locals is working. Locals sucks today. Locals is like allergic to Christmas. It's like being run by the Grinch. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to pop in about like 10 minutes or so before I got in. So this way you have some sort of context and background for the conversation. I don't know. I don't remember what elements of this whole thing they were talking about. It was he had a 9-hour stream. So you sort of need to know where to find me, which I actually peeked in to see what stage I joined in at. So I did find that, but I'm going to be starting like 10 minutes before I get in this. This way we sort of have a little bit of a feel for what the conversation was that I walked in on. I had been listening for like 40 minutes, though, at this point. Yeah. That's better. Wait, I don't think I shared audio. I definitely did not share audio. I'm going to start that over again. Yeah, that's a less boomery way of doing this. If you have any questions, yeah, I know 9 hours is insane. I mean, 9 friggin' hours. There's like an hour of me, and I might go a little bit beyond me because I sort of lost audio at a certain point, and then when I tried getting back in, I couldn't find the damn channel anymore. I was like, I don't know which room I'm supposed to be going in. I don't know if I'm in there and he's not letting me in. I don't know what's happening here. But yeah, I did get like a good, like nearly an hour, roughly an hour in there fighting with them. And to be fair, before we go further, I want to be clear. At Destiny, I felt was being pretty fair. He seemed to be like sort of asking good faith, reasonable questions. Not as much the other two. I was fighting against two people in this. So here we go.
Participating in an election, I think even conservatives say, "Well, yeah, of course, obviously," but they would say,
I'm
"Trump."
not so sure about that.
Okay.
I've heard Democrats say that even if he did it, he shouldn't be disqualified, and we should just ignore that. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing.
And there are conservatives right now who are saying even if he incited, he shouldn't.
Yeah. Yes. Obviously. Yes.
Be disqualified because the presidency isn't an office, so they appeal to other alleged.
I think that's the stupidest fucking argument I've heard.
100.
You think it's such a stupid argument? It's such a stupid argument that it's the very argument that the district court judge hanged her hat on. Crazy stupid argument. The one that she thought was most compelling. Okay. You think it's stupid?
It is,
bro. 100%.
Right. So look at the context of how this is occurring. Trump has, since before the election, been saying the election is stolen. I don't need to.
Not relevant at all.
You need to go all into this.
Pisco. If you want to see who's talking, you have to look in the top left corner here, because the way he runs this, and like I said, I appreciate the way that Pisco moderated this debate. I think he did a pretty damn good job. Not going to kid you. I think he did a pretty damn good job. I don't like the fact that he has it structured that when he has guests come on, then no one can see these folks. So it's like, it's very, I'm like, I don't even know if like I have one foot in the door, one foot out the door as I'm talking. I don't know how my audio levels are. I can't tell anything. It's a very discombobulating. I felt very discombobulated. Very, very discombobulated.
This, right? But it is astounding that the night of the election, he declares there's a fraud on the American people and declares victory even before any evidence of fraud could conceivably be, at least sufficient to change the result of the election, could have reached his ears. It was that very night. He was actually in the lead when he...
How is that relevant to anything? Like, how is this relevant to anything? Like, this is a lawyer talking, and I don't understand how this is relevant to anything.
He said it in those states. And throughout this time, he's engaged in multiple conspiracies to try
None of this is relevant.
to
So
steal the
actually,
election
hang on.
from
I want to
Joe Biden.
interrupt you. I want to
Yeah, go
interrupt you
ahead.
because I think it goes before that. He was even saying in the lead up before
Yes.
November 4th
Correct.
that if he loses, the only way would be fraud. So even not even the night of, even in the weeks and months prior to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Correct.
Yeah, so he genuinely believed that. He genuinely believed he could not possibly lose to this guy, and so did a lot of people. A lot of people thought that was true. It's very easy, like 3 years later, to just sort of pretend that this was a close election, that this was close. A lot of folks forget that when they held rallies, Trump had tens of thousands of people chanting, "We love you, we love you," and Biden had 6 circles for social distancing, of which 2 would be empty. I mean, this was not comparable. This was not comparable. So a lot of people were like, yeah, he cannot possibly lose absent fraud. It's not like a crazy conspiracy theory. It's like basically like someone saying like, yeah, there's no way that the Ravens are gonna lose to the Jets at home. You're like, that's just not happening. There's no way that's happening. That's just not going to happen. It's ridiculous. And yes, I am in a football zone because I did advance tonight to my fantasy football Super Bowl. I know a lot of you were concerned. Ease up. Everything's okay. I managed to escape by, even though I had all sorts of injuries that were happening in the middle of the game, beginnings of games. I was like, oh my God, this is just like, it was just like trying to like find some way for this thing to be scuttled. But fortunately, I was going against Brock Purdy, who basically became the worst quarterback the 49ers ever had since that guy who kneeled for the flag. So God bless you, Brock. Let's get back to a lot of you don't want to hear about that. I know you don't want to hear. Let's get back to work.
And so he reject also the possibility that he would accept the results of the election. And so this is a person, even into the lead up, we have a sense of his mind, which is there's no any contest really that he's ever lost that he said is fair. He said 2012 was rigged. He said 2016 was rigged, even though he won it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's not a sign of someone who's acting in bad faith when he's saying after the fact that it's rigged. This is what's so stupid to me. Like this whole argument is self-defeating. It's an admission that, yeah, he does not trust our election processes. He doesn't trust them. So when he's questioning them after the fact, that's not inconsistent. That's completely consistent. This is what's so stupid to me. I'm like, how is that proof of anything? Go Lions, get your kneecaps bitten. #one pride. Yeah, if your team motto is one pride, you might want to rethink that whole thing. Just rethink it. Just I don't know. It's my suggestion. And I'll tell you something. I'm a huge fan of Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's like one of my favorite players in the NFL. I've owned him every year on at least one team. I love that guy. He's amazing. He's amazingly consistent. Just amazing. But yeah, #one pride is pretty.
Right? So this is someone who has shown an unwillingness to accept loss. Going into December, he is now engaged in multiple conspiracies to try to steal the election. And when all of his court cases and his conspiracies begin to unravel and fail, except the last one he has in the bank, which is this fraudulent elector Mike Pence scheme, he calls forth his people to come to January 6th. And you can read the opinion of
None of that is relevant. Like, that's the question you have to ask yourself. How is that relevant? Because the question is not, it's a matter of, when you're talking about incitement, it's a matter of what is his intent? Is it his intent to try and incite something illegal?
kinds of things he's saying that make it clear that what his intent is, right? His intent is very clearly to stop Joe Biden from becoming the president.
A lot of people, yeah, that's not necessarily illegal. There are legal ways to do that. There are legal ways to do that. So, yeah, that's not necessarily illegal.
Anyone disagree with that?
No, I
Yeah,
don't. I
but
don't.
if
I
he's
agree
doing
with
it legally versus illegally,
See, Destiny's asking good questions here. He's doing it legally versus illegally.
I think is
No, fair. But do we all agree that the intent of bringing people to January 6th was to stop the steal?
I think we can agree with that. But that's a
It
really
was called the Stop the Steal rally. That's not. You're not breaking news here.
loaded statement, right? Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
well, okay, so I personally agree, yes, but if I had to steelman the opposite side, I would say that
Why are you steelmanning this? This is a guy who just doesn't understand anything about where MAGA is coming from. No, it was a Stop the Steal rally.
his intent was to stop the steal, but not to violently stop the steal.
Well, yeah, that's what
Precisely. That's the point.
Pisco's saying. But he's
I'm
saying
not-
he's just
I'm
trying
not
to get us
sure
to
yet.
right there on the stop the steal thing, right?
Yeah.
I think we all agree with
Yeah,
that.
but
But like saying
insurrection
like we all need to
requires-
get out and vote could literally be like stop the steal, right?
Yeah.
But I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah. So
But
I would say that the MAGA counter argument is that
I don't know who Mike 91 is, but he's the one who was trying to put forward the MAGA argument, even though he's a lefty, and doing a piss poor job. No offense, Mike, but pun intended on the whole Pisco thing.
he did not intend to violently stop the steal, or he did not intend to stop the steal through
That's
force.
fine.
He wanted to protest. He wanted to organize a protest to
Yeah.
get the people in the Capitol building to change their mind without, basically putting a gun to their head.
But the plain
I
district court and the
understand-
Supreme Court addressed that. I don't know if I'm getting
Yeah.
ahead of Pisco there.
By the way, when I'm on this thing, I can't see who is talking. Like the whole Josiah, I see a room, like a Discord room, and I have no idea who's talking, unless I recognize the voice. I didn't even know this guy Josiah was there.
But they talk about, that's part of their determination. They talk about the months and months and months of Trump's increasing adoption of like violent rhetoric and not reacting to the violent rhetoric of his base. Like these two things are running in parallel. I don't know if Pisco's getting there, but
Yeah, no, 100% that plays a role into the fact.
What? I know what you're trying to do there. I know what you're trying to do. Not cool. Not cool. Bastard.
fact that this is developing, it's escalating. He's aware of these threats. He's absolutely aware
No.
that
What
people are getting violent, that
What are you talking about? Based on what are you basing that on? What is that based on?
there's actually multiple instances of violence. So he's knowledgeable. He's the president of the United States. He has access to the information.
No, there was actually no reports of violence that happened on January 5th. There was no reports of violence that happened before 1:00 on January 6th. So at what moment is he engaging in insurrection?
He has access to the threat assessments about what's going on.
Yeah, he has access to the threat assessments, which is why he tried putting people in place to stop it.
So all we're doing now is just building a wall, a metaphoric wall, brick by
Yeah, but
brick.
didn't
to
he-
show that-
didn't he
I
also
mean,
get
okay,
access to
again-
a ton of stuff that he just never chose to look at? Like,
None of this is incitement. That's the thing. If he intentionally built the wall, that has nothing to do with incitement, rather than if he walked over to an existing wall. It's not even remotely relevant. Because imagine if he had built the wall and then someone else had actually incited. Would he be guilty of that? Of course not. Would he be a co-conspirator? Would he be co-conspirator with? No, of course not. Everyone admits that he tried getting people out there. He was like, yeah, come, it'll be a big party. It's a patriotic duty. He was pushing as many people as possible to come there, while at the same time saying that the government was stealing your election from you. And there's no denying that. We all believed it was true, even if he wouldn't have said it. A lot of people like to think that, like, oh, the reason MAGA was there is because he duped them into thinking this. No. This is the common misconception that the left loves to throw out there. They love to say that it's like, oh yeah, if he would have accepted the election, like if he would have been a good boy and bent the knee, in that case, yeah, everyone would have just been like, of course, that's what happened. Even Trump admits it. No. Did you see that happen in 2016 with Hillary after she conceded? Did her folks stop saying, hey, we have to stop him from being president? Let's do the whole faithless elector scam. Did they stop marching up and down the streets of New York in 2016? Because I remember seeing those marches in New York City in person. I remember seeing them march on by me, screaming, not my president, not my president, and like a bunch of idiot children. So yeah, to think that there wouldn't have been. Now, were there probably more people there because he was encouraging them? Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. But I don't even understand how any of this is relevant.
Yeah,
Could it
like
be
keeping
possible
my
they just never
MAGA
read those threat
hat on.
assessments.
Keeping my
What do you-
Sean and his handler are watching. That's Joe. It's too late. Hide your kids, hide your wife, because they're raping everyone out here. Oh, one of the best clips of all times. Hide your kids, hide your wife. One of the best clips of all time. Hey, Indigenous soul. Hide your kids, hide your wife.
MAGA hat on, right? That the Trump,
So
like
you're-
that the go on, Rachel.
I'm going
I'll
to be
let
there
you
in a
finish.
minute. I'm almost
So
there.
because you're saying like he had access to these
I think by
threat assessments,
I'm at
he had access to these
5:28.
things, he
I'm
should
at
have known
5:30. I think I'm at
that there was violence happening. He could have just been retarded and not read any of this stuff.
No,
He could
he
have had
did
no
know.
idea that it's based.
What violence? Can you document what violence you're talking about here?
Did
He
he?
knew.
Did he?
He
How?
knew.
Like how?
He tweeted in response, at least to some of these events, and he was aware also that there have been multiple instances of violence related to his people.
And what does that have to do with anything? Even if he was aware of that, it's like this is a lawyer who's talking here. What does that have to do with incitement? It doesn't matter the audience you're talking to. That this is so stupid. This is so stupid.
That just
Like-
goes.
It has to be something that would be reasonably interpreted to be inciting violence.
It's obvious.
There's also, I'm pretty sure there was testimony from one of his witnesses under cross-examination that Trump pre-selected, like he omitted certain people from the speech on January 6th. Like he said, this person, this person can't show up because there was the increased risk of violence or something like that. Like he chose certain people that he thought would be more extreme.
What is your source for that? That's what I want to know. What is your freaking source? I want to hear the source for that. I want to hear your source for that. And even if he put up there the most extremist person in the world, that would be the person who's guilty of incitement.
Oh, so he chose people specifically to increase the chance of violence, not decrease.
Let me find the document itself. I'll send you the screenshot.
I'll keep my MAGA
that's fine.
again.
I'll accept that. I was just
So-
like curious, like the specific examples of him knowing that these people are getting more violent and choosing to continue down the violent path. That's like something that I'm missing.
And he's raising the stakes here, right? He's raising the stakes in a way that we all understand. This is a battle for our democracy. This is a theft of your country. This is the end
Oh my God. Why would raising the stakes be relevant?
So-
of America.
To
But that could be a
respond,
genuine
I mean, to
belief.
respond to that, right? Like again, MAGA hat on here, so not my personal opinion.
Not my personal opinion. I'm just going to tell you what they would say. Okay.
That Trump is. Let's not hold his incompetence against him here, right? He is just picking people that he knows likes him, and he wants to pick the people that he thinks are going to protest the most fervently for what he believes is to be, the end of American democracy, right? He genuinely believes in his heart that there was fraud here, and he genuinely believes that this is the most important thing for Americans to protest peacefully about.
There's
And
no,
sure, he
hang on a
uses-
second. There's no exception. There's no exception for incitement or insurrection based on good faith.
There's no incitement if you're not the one who's doing it. Jackass. Oh my God. If he put up there the most crazy, radical, lunatic moron, the biggest Q person out there, who is a fervent believer that it's violence first and sort things out in the courts later. Shoot first and ask questions later. And arguably, even if he reviewed the guy's speech with him beforehand, he's not the one engaging in incitement. Even if he brings the whole crowd out there, says, go up there, speak your mind, tell them what's on your mind. That's not him engaging in incitement. It's so stupid. It's like he put his like retard hat on as soon as he hears the name Trump.
Right?
No,
So,
no,
like,
we're talking about intent here.
wait,
We're
I
talking
just
about
wanna be-
intent.
I understand that. I will get across what I'm trying to say, and you'll understand it. There were people in the Civil War who genuinely thought that what they were doing was legal, that it was ethical, that it was supported by the record, and that they had every right to try to secede. That does not insulate you from being an insurrectionist. Your good faith belief about X. Okay.
Well,
Here's Joe.
Yeah,
But
but the
notwithstanding that, I do
insurrection
not
could
give him
be
that credit.
done by the Proud Boys, which Trump has no connection to, and his genuine good faith belief is his 57 insane court cases are going to win. He just needs to stall for time by
What
having
did I?
people
What did I
protest.
just say?
well, I think we have
You-
to
you
be
said there's no-
technical
there's no-
here, right?
Wait,
Because
what did I just
You're
say?
saying that there has to be there's no good faith clause. If you were in the Civil War and you supported the Confederate government, you are an insurrectionist. Yes,
That there is no good faith exception, that you believe that the
Correct.
law says
But
one
he's
thing,
not
or
part
that
of it.
something happens.
yes, but he's not part of the insurrection at all because the things that he's talking about are separate legal normal processes available to the American citizens. And just because you have extremists hijack it and do an
You're
insurrection
not
on their own
understanding-
doesn't
you're
mean
not
that you're
understanding
Wait,
the
let me hold on.
concept
Let me
of
take
love.
the contrary side. Okay,
Oh,
before Pisco takes
God.
30 minutes to insult. Okay, so it doesn't really matter, like whether or not the other people were involved. The oath breakers, whatever, is irrelevant. There's going to be an analysis done, or imagine the Supreme Court did the Colorado Supreme Court did an analysis on the things Trump said in the setting that he said it to see if that would amount to incitement. That's all that matters. What happened past, I believe, is
And what happened past is not relevant, even though they spent a lot of time talking about it.
not. Well, I mean, they analyzed it afterwards, but that's
Yeah, which is kind of shows how ridiculous they were.
not whether or not the oath breakers were involved or not. I don't think was the more relevant part. I think it was analyzing the things that he said in the context they were said. Does that make sense?
And the content, I don't pretend that, like, just because
Where am I?
Trump is there's no good faith exception, that therefore Trump committed engagement in insurrection, or that something like that happened. I'm responding to what was said, which is like, well, he actually thought the election was stolen. Well, whether he thought it was stolen or not doesn't give him the right to engage in insurrection. Agree?
No. What I'm talking about is whether he intended for the insurrection to happen,
Oh,
or
yeah,
whether he
for sure,
intended
yeah,
to
that's-
participate in
wanna get-
for his belief on what he wanted it to be peaceful or violent. If his defense is that I did not intend for it to be
Sort of scanning through.
violent, I intended it for it to be
We have enough
peaceful
background
protest.
here
I just
that
use such
understand
strong
what I was
language
listening to.
because
I
I
think that's
genuinely
the
believe
Wait,
marginal
real
health
quick.
care-
Is that does intention matter there?
Intention
to
matters.
engagement. It does. Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah,
no,
like,
to
let's say
incitement.
the
Does intention
actual-
matter?
This is
Does
when I
intention matter
came
to
in.
incitement?
Yes.
Yes.
So if I'm at a church and I'm at like a political rally or whatever, and I'm like, we're gonna kill those Democrats, let's go, and people walk out,
Yeah.
and they pull out guns, like, oh shit, I didn't mean like that, and they start shooting people.
Yeah, if-
Can I
if-
say like,
if it
why
was
didn't I
actually
didn't
a
mean
joke-
it? Yeah.
Yeah, if it was actually subjectively
To answer
a joke,
his
then it wasn't.
question to that, the legal answer to that question is if a reasonable person would take your words to mean incitement, then that's what it is. But it's not a reasonable person like a reasonable oath keeper. It's not like there's a difference whether it's an oath keeper or like nanny's convention. I haven't seen any case law that says there's any difference at all.
Was an incitement.
Yeah.
Right?
Does
Yeah,
it?
it
Well,
requires
does
intent.
it matter? Does it matter what your intention is, or does it matter what a reasonable interpretation would be?
Well,
You need both.
okay. So
You're both.
people, when they're reviewing the evidence,
Uh-huh.
right, and you say it was all just a joke and it was memes, they'll probably consider what like your words mean to an objective
Well-
person, and so that'll be priced in somewhere in the analysis. But if the jury or
That's
whoever the
actually
fact finder
true.
is genuinely convinced that you actually thought it was a joke, even though it was fucking
That's
stupid,
actually true.
you
Yeah,
would
but
be not incitement
What if it's
under the
something?
legal standard.
What if it's something intentional? Like, let's say that you're the attorney general and I have a case against you to get you impeached. And I go tell my crowd, we need to get Pisco out of office. And what I mean is that we need the impeachment process to go through. But what they do is go to your office and lynch you. Like,
Right, should I
am I
jump forward
inciting
to
them,
like where I
or
get
am
there?
I
'Cause it's
just
like another
You
5 minutes away.
subjectively did not, if it was not your intention to bring about lawless or violent
Hey,
action,
PC,
then
how are
You
you?
are not guilty of incitement
I
under
bet he glosses over the court's claim Trump is different compared to everyone else, just him.
the current.
I didn't even
law.
get to that part of it with him. I didn't
You
even
get,
get
so like if you let's say that it was extreme.
I spent the vast majority of my hour arguing with him about a state's right to actually interpret this statute, whether a state court has that power.
Extremely dangerous for you to have said that. And
And thanks for the
you
raid,
know, your
brother.
words actually incited people, and they
Merry
were actually
Christmas.
words of incitement, but you just didn't mean it.
Yeah.
Although,
then,
you know,
Like there
then
could
you're
be some
not
other
guilty of
meaning
it.
that I meant
You're
that I
not
used too
liable
strong
for it,
language.
even though, but like, you just keep in mind, if all we have on the record are your words, it's going to be hard to rebut the presumption that you didn't mean the ordinary meaning of your words and you didn't have an awareness of it. So as a matter of just
Yeah.
like practicality, we're going to
So-
import the like typical meaning there.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess like if we take a look at what the tweets again that they used, like how do you show that Trump knew that this was enough to cause violence when we've seen like other similar levels of rhetoric from people like
Well,
this?
that's
Like how do you
tweets-
establish Trump is his intention there with all the stuff that he's doing versus it just
all the
happened to
buildup-
coincide?
All the buildup is context. This is a totality of circumstances approach, right? Like if you removed all the context from his words and just looked at the objective words themselves in isolation, you could make an argument that there's no way that this is incitement.
how do you know that anyone who's in the crowd was ever on Twitter ever? How do you know any of that? It's the stupid. This is what makes it so stupid.
I can make that argument beautifully, right? Like if we just were in a room together and I said the same things, or if like we were saying it as part of a play and it was all just like a farce or whatever, then there's no
Oh yeah, we didn't even get to that part of it. I actually we might have. I don't remember.
way that those words would have.
Yeah, but I guess how do
any
you
kind of
show
intent.
directly
Wait,
that
let
it
me-
was
let me-
to
let me
incite
finish.
violence versus? Okay.
So obviously, when we look at words, their meaning and how you react to them depends on context. So you saying something, those same exact words in one context versus another, is very indicative of both your intent and the likelihood that's going to actually
I was
arise
looking for
Oh,
it.
you can.
Oh,
Well, thanks for having.
are contingent on, right? If we didn't have any of that buildup, it would be a much tougher case to prove that Trump actually intended to do X.
Are you guys able to hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes,
can
we
hear
Yeah.
hear you.
Oh, you can. Well, thanks for having me in here, brother. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Just a real quick
Well,
to summarize what Pisco was saying. So Pisco was saying that, like, okay, I just looked up the Brandenburg test. Okay, so I understand a little bit better. And then for the incitement thing,
There
the
we go.
mens rea for incitement does require intent, and the being grossly careless or whatever doesn't actually rise to that threshold of inciting to violent action. So different statements that
correct.
Donald Trump had made to like Pence saying don't certify the election, blah blah blah, could arguably be used to show the mens rea for an incitement later on to this activity. Is what
in theory, for the purpose of using it to show what's going through his mind, yes. But there's nothing that in those tweets. In other words, let's imagine he had said in his tweets, because think about this: in order for someone to be guilty of incitement, it has to be near in time and place as to when the actual event would happen. So imagine if he had sent out on Twitter that I'm going to be telling you to fight, and when I say that, I mean bring your guns with you because there's going to be shooting and people are going to be going down. Something to that effect. So that could show that later on when he says fight, that gives context to it. Like if he had been express in saying that when I say these things later on, when I say these words later on, it really means this. Yeah, that could be context. That could be used for that purpose. But if he had said all of that beforehand and then never used those code words, that's not incitement. Even if he said, hey, you need to show up in DC on January 6th because that's going to be a bloodbath and it's us or them and we have to come in there with our guns. We have to come in there ready to use our guns. And, if he had said something to that effect, which I don't want YouTube to get confused because I know the overlords at YouTube are very, very easily confused by plain English. I'm not saying anyone should have said that. I'm simply saying, had he said something very express like that, not incitement. That's not incitement. The only way it shows context is if he had made it clear in those statements that, hey, when I'm saying these things, when I'm saying these words, I really mean do something violent. Then, yeah, okay, fine. That would be context.
Pisco saying.
Right.
So
Even if
correct.
by themselves, they're
Yeah.
not, the statements themselves are not the smoking gun.
Correct. Yeah. So, for instance, if I were to
And the
go
reason
somewhere and I were to
Brandenburg-
say, everybody, just so you know, the president is Agent Smith. If I had spoken privately to someone earlier and I said, I know that these guys are crazy, and if I tell them Agent Smith to go kill him,
Yes,
you could use that
exactly.
statement to prove the mens rea of what I
Yep.
was saying because I know what kind of an outcome I'm going to produce. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, Steven, you got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that part I
Al,
agree
yeah.
with.
Or good logic. Yeah. Go for it. Okay.
No, that part as far as understanding Brandenburg, that I agree with. And the point to Trump bringing up Brandenburg.
That's argues no doesn't mean no. Yeah, apparently.
is that since he's not doing anything wrong until he crosses that Brandenburg threshold, to hold him accountable for engaging in insurrection by using his voice to do something is a direct violation of his free speech rights. I mean, it's a pretty clear, blatant violation. If the point is you can't be punished for what you say, and all of a sudden he's clearly being punished for what he's saying.
Well, wait,
even
can
though he
I answer
hasn't
just
legally
No,
violated
wait,
it.
super quick question, just super
No,
quick
he's
question on this, okay, before it
He's
comes
not
up.
being punished. He's not keeping him off the ticket is not punishing him, not at all. Listen what Pisco's saying here. It's hilarious.
Wait, real
Wait,
quick. Wait, so the question is whether or not he's engaged in the insurrection. Good logic. Do you agree that if he incited the insurrection, then he's engaged in it? Yes or no?
Do I agree that if he incited, then he engaged in it?
Yes.
I think that that's an interesting question that no court has ever decided yet. No court has ever decided that.
A court
Well, that's
has
what
decided
the
it.
Colorado Supreme Court
Two
decided.
courts have decided it: the Colorado Trial Court and the
Now we get into the legitimacy of that court. This is where I start attacking legitimacy.
Colorado Supreme Court. They both decided it.
Okay, yeah, but prior to that, then we don't have incitement as counting as engagement. This is a new.
Not on. Yeah.
Okay,
This is the
okay,
first
okay.
time we
Hold on
reached
a second.
America. Yeah.
You're starting with the premise that a state has a capacity to do this, which is thoroughly illogical to assume that a state would have that power.
Are we
Because I
going
want
to
you
get
to
into procedural questions, or are we going to talk about insurrection and incitement?
I'm just saying, but you're saying it has been decided, and I'm saying is, so if you three sitting
You said
here
no
decide,
court. You said no court had found it, and I was just telling you there have been courts that have now found it.
no, but I'm saying there's no court that has a capacity to decide this,
Okay, but that's a separate thing. You can say that they're lawless
What I'm
and
saying
come
is,
into that.
so if the three of you decide to call yourself the court of destiny, and then you decide that engaging the incitement is a
Come
form
on,
of
this is an
engagement,
actual
would that
court
mean
with
something
actual
also?
power under state law, and you said that no.
MLS, how are you, brother? How are you, brother? You guys don't have to pop in here, but I'm going to send invites to you guys so you can sit here. If you think I missed something, you can correct me in my arguments here. But I'm going to send invites to MLS and to Peace and to Potentially Criminal. You do not need to come in, and I don't expect you to come in. I would think you're stupid if you are coming in because you probably have family and Christmas and whatever is associated with that. But I want you to I want you to feel welcome. And that's the reason and you are welcome. So that's why I'm sharing this. But it's not at all a request. It's simply an offer. If this works for you, do it. And if it doesn't work for you, yeah, then I'm definitely not going to be offended at all. So let me share that. I shared that just now with Sean, and now I'm sending it to Making Law Simple.
No court had said that incitement is engagement, and I was just informing the audience that this court, in fact,
Well,
found that.
let's move on from this pedantic argument. Good logic. What's your point? Is it a constitutional issue?
No, it's not. No, it's not a constitutional issue. I'm saying it's just stop for a second and ask yourself: when the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendments were being ratified, what was the point? What was the point behind it? The point was that we just come out of Civil War. We just come out of Civil War. And one of the primary
it's like I feel like I'm teaching them basically a high school level understanding of American history.
Issues in this war is who trumps who? Do individual state rights overcome federal power, or does federal power trump? Can they basically tell states what to do? After the North won, they decided to ratify these amendments. They basically said, you can't just decide to do whatever the hell you want in your state just because you're a state. You can't have slavery in your states just because that's what your people want. There's certain rights that are inherent. And you also can't decide that, hey, this person who swore an oath to uphold the Constitution can now come back and then engage in insurrection, which that clearly was clearly an insurrection at the very least. That now they're going to come back and promise to uphold the Constitution again, which would seem ridiculous. So now we have a question. Who's deciding whether or not someone engaged in insurrection? Who should have that power? So ask yourself this question for a moment, gentlemen, and think about this. Would it make any sense in 1868 and 1870 for the individual state of South Carolina to have the power alongside Congress to decide also, but they also have the power to decide whether someone engaged in insurrection, that they can say, oh, this person here who killed 40 members of the Union Army, he didn't engage in insurrection because we're a state court, we just decided that. Do you think that there's any logic in saying that when they say that Congress shall adopt appropriate legislation, that opens a doorway for anyone besides Congress to weigh in on this.
Well,
Because it's
I don't think
100%.
that's the right. I don't think that's the right question because so
No, no,
I don't like your question, Joe. I don't like your question. I don't like your question, Joe. That doesn't stop trying to look at things in context. That's not good. That's not fair.
states.
question that deserves answer. No, we're going to answer the question. It is a
Okay.
question that needs to be answered. And the answer is, of course, it makes sense. The provisions of the Reconstruction Amendments have all historically been applied, not just by federal courts. As you well know, Section 1, equal protection claims are heard in state courts all the time. Due process claims are heard in state courts all the time. There's no presumption these other claims are that there's exclusive federal jurisdiction to those types of claims. And in fact, as you know, the case law is extremely clear that state courts are assumed to be able to enforce federal law until and unless Congress displaces them. And so absolutely, unless you're willing to say here right now that the Second Amendment is not going to be applied as to the states, or that we're not going to hear state equal protection claims.
That's not what this is such a red herring that he brings up here. And we spent a long time arguing about this issue. I'm warning you now, we spent a long time arguing about this issue.
Arising from the U.S. Constitution, it's absurd. They're all enforceable only through federal, or there's multiple jurisdictions here.
Yeah,
but
so
I
there's
want to
no-
make sure that
there's
you're not
no
gonna say-
exclusive-
That's an illogical counterpoint. I'll explain to you why.
Well,
Because-
give me a turn too. So Pisco's
Okay,
right
go
that
ahead.
there's no exclusive federal jurisdiction, but to zoom out to address your larger issue, I guess, which is you're saying, how does it make sense for states to have the right to basically impact this or have any say in this amendment that was ratified to deal with states having too much power, right? Is that inaccurate?
That's not completely accurate because
Okay, if you
Justice
could
Samara
do
in
in
his
one
dissent-
sentence, what's your...
No, well, Justice Samara in his dissent basically made a distinction between portions of these amendments that are taking off shackles from people and protecting people versus those that are punishing people, which
For
you
due
can
process
understand.
purposes, not for
Look
jurisdiction.
who's here. Look who's here. Look who's here. My good friend. My good friend. How are you, brother?
Merry Christmas, Joe. Hope you had a great day today.
Whoa, didn't mean to do that. Meant to do this. No, not that's not something.
Sorry, I'll say Happy Hanukkah, Joe. Yes, I'm sorry, he's the wrong one.
It's not Hanukkah anymore. That's like
Yes.
what do you wish me? Happy Hanukkah 2024.
Yeah, sure.
No. This is Christmas season, and you're
Yes.
entitled to your Christmas season, and I want you all to enjoy your Christmas
Thank
season.
you.
And God bless. And yeah, you know what? Jews live through Christmas season also. So you want to say Merry Christmas to me? I look at it as like, all right, you're wishing me good tidings.
Yes.
Why would I take that as anything other than the warm wishes than if you said good morning? So
Yeah, hope you had a nice day today.
thank you. Thank you so much. How were your holidays? Were they good?
Pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. It's nice. It's nice
Alright.
and warm here today. But yeah, I do. So are all these people attorneys?
No, Destiny's not an attorney. for
Well, I know
sure.
Destiny's not, but like the
I
Smite
don't know-
91.
I don't know
like-
who these other folks are.
Oh, okay.
I have no idea. I just know Pisco.
Yeah,
So-
and it's never been clear like what type of legal work does Pisco do?
I don't know. That's a good
Because like I mean he's like he says he does like he's like a baby litigator, which doesn't really mean anything to me because that just says like I work in a big time law firm, and that means I actually don't get to do anything.
Mhm.
So I mean he could throw out like these esoteric arguments, but I think this is very much like when Nick said, "Okay," and the judge says, "No, you're wrong." There is no like, "Well, Your Honor," it's like, "No, that move along." Like I love how they're like, "But that's not the right answer."
Right.
It's like it's not the right question. It's a very important question.
And-
And just because the courts have been doing something doesn't mean it's acceptable.
And it's also like the courts have been doing this. There's one court that did it. The rest of the
Yeah.
courts are like, we're not doing
Yeah.
this. We're not touching this.
Yeah. What courts have done? They've only done 14th Amendment analysis after the Supreme Court's done it. So that's not like to say there's groundbreaking state level, equal protection arguments out there.
Yeah. So let me move forward here.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I appreciate your input.
Purposes for due process
No,
purposes.
Because
No,
because we
what
can
I'm
all
saying is
agree
that's
that
very-
that
But that's a very important distinction, which is very logical. Because if you think about the basic civil rights, that in order for Congress to come along now and pass some sort of amendment, which is going to be broadening people's civil rights, yeah, that makes sense that they can do that, and you don't need to have Congress alone affecting that. So when it comes to broadening people's rights that they're not going to be discriminated, yeah, individual states, Pisco is correct. Plenty of times we see that individual states can broaden people's rights. But if you want to restrict someone, take away their rights, that is a whole different story. And you're trying to
wait a
pretend
second.
that the
Well,
same
These are
Oh,
limitations,
yeah,
just like
right.
Section 3 is. These other provisions are also limitations. When you
No,
say that they, of course, they're limitations. When you say
Well,
that,
it's not limitations. It's protecting
yes, it
individual
is.
liberty. It's protecting civil liberties from the state. It's
Okay,
saying that
wait.
it's saying that
Frame
the
it
state can't
however you
punish.
want. You can frame it however you want. Those basic provisions of the 14th.
He gets to a point here where he actually starts arguing, and this is well, I don't want to ruin it for y'all.
I haven't seen this. What night did this happen?
This was Saturday night.
I kind of get the feeling I think I know what road he's about to walk down.
He's about to walk down a very stupid
I think he's
road.
about to paint some corners.
Yes. He's about to paint some corners black.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. He all of a sudden he basically starts arguing about property rights.
Well, Joe, I want to hear it. This is going to be good, I guess.
The Equal Protection Clause, Due Process Clause basically say that the government can't do certain things. It's a limitation on the ability of individuals, and for the 13th Amendment, on private citizens, in fact, there are limitations. There are additional constraints on the democracy. And in that vein,
came along decades later.
is also an additional constraint. And I would say, just like the other provisions of the 14th Amendment, they are protecting our liberty. That is, our liberty to be free from insurrectionists and rebellionists and rebels and being our...
I guess I just want to clarify, Good Logic, what your position is. Like, do you think that?
See, like when I start trying to respond to it, all of a sudden, like another guy pops in on me. Runko, if you want to pop in here, I'll send you an invite. Also, you don't have to. No one has to. It's just it's a good tidings. So but don't feel any sort of pressure at all. It's totally if you're just in the mood. So
the right to run for president is a fundamental civil right that needs to be protected by the Constitution.
Notice how he phrased that question. Is the right to run for president? What would you answer to that question?
Yes, it's a fundamental right. It is not it's not specifically enumerated, but it's heavily implied. We talked about this the one night. If I can run for president, if I'm a natural born citizen of 35 years of age, then my right to run for that office is a constitutional right. Because if I can't run for the office, well, I mean, who gets a run for it? Well, you're taking that right away from me. And that's a right guaranteed in the Constitution because there is no other requirement than any 35-year-old natural-born citizen can run for president.
But I don't look at it as the same right as freedom of speech.
Well, no, it's very much like the right to privacy. It's not necessarily enumerated, but it's an implied right.
So when you're saying fundamental right, though...
But it's still fundamental. It's still a fundamental right. It's just implied. I mean, the idea that you don't have the right to run for the office that you're eligible, like, you're eligible for this office. Okay, well, that means I have the right to run for it. There's no other qualification or proviso that talks about running. It's just you run.
Well, I was hesitant to qualify as fundamental, but let's.
I mean, it's.
I'm like,
it's Article 2 and Article 1. You have the right to run for those.
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think one can make an argument that it falls under First Amendment freedom of association issue. But
the Constitution does pose arbitrary limitations.
I'm very loath to label something a fundamental right. I mean, that's a very strong term.
Well, yeah.
So
if you could clarify,
would I label that a fundamental right? I don't know that I'm an authority to tell you that this is or is not a fundamental right. Is there anywhere expressed that the right to run for office is a fundamental right?
Well, did you also refer to it as a punishment? I'm not an attorney. I'm hoping you can clarify here because my understanding is. They're making the case that it's a disqualification, just like a 34-year-old.
Why do we have him in the debate then?
Because they're constitutionally ineligible to.
I walked into this. There was really just Pisco. So like that's why I heard so much stupid arguing. And Mike 91 was trying to steel man the MAGA perspective, and he was doing such a terrible job with it that I was like, I need to get in there.
The run for president. So too is an insurrectionist.
But the state courts enforce those qualifications all the time.
Yeah, okay, but there's a difference between someone who has entered into the category of someone who's eligible and then being punished that you are now disqualified from that, irrespective of anything. What do you mean?
Sorry, could you clarify? Well, no, hang on. Wait a minute. I did.
You're saying there's a distinction between qualification and disqualification that matters. There is no distinction that matters. It's the same exact
Why?
thing. It's
Why?
looking at a glass half empty and half full. The disqualification of Section 3 is assumed to apply instantly. That's why Congress, in the first instance,
Well, that's his own read. that's part of what.
Yeah,
they're
that
arguing
is a self. Yeah, no.
about. That's the whole argument about self-executing.
Yeah, that's not because it wasn't because they had to stop people from doing it. Congress had to pass a lot. Remember what I said? It's just like slavery. There is no okay. Well, I enslave somebody. There is no like. How do you stop me?
Yeah.
Through the use, like through government, through the laws against imprisonment, human trafficking. There is no just like I go to prison for violating the 13th Amendment.
All right. Welcome aboard, Runkle. How was
I
your
would argue.
Christmas?
It's all right.
Yes. Hi,
Better
Runkle.
Christmas than usual.
Merry Christmas. I'm so happy that it was better than usual. What was there some particular standout moment or something?
No, I just been feeling pretty decent, I think. I tried to catch Sean there before he but I didn't make it back in time to catch the end of his stream there. So I was
So I'm the beneficiary of that.
Yeah, that's okay, Runkle. Thanks
There you
for good to see you tonight.
All
well,
right.
likewise. It's what is it?
He ran out of Christmas trees to kick over.
I've been trying to show those who's down
MLS
in Whoville,
yes.
who's boss.
MLS says it's a very interesting perspective. That's a fundamental right. I think that I'm so hesitant to label anything that's not expressly enumerated as a
Well,
fundamental right
that's
say
where
this too is a fundamental right because I'm walking myself into I'm pinning myself in a corner when I do that.
Yeah.
And then I have to start basically expressing whether it's the exact same level fundamental right as freedom of speech.
Well, you want to back Pisco in a corner, say it's a right like abortion. Is he going to say that's not a fundamental right? Watch him melt down from there. And because here's the thing: if it's a fundamental right, you need due process, and it's beyond a reasonable doubt to strip fundamental rights. We don't strip due process.
Well, that's my point. Yeah, you can't just strip. It doesn't have to be a fundamental right for it to be something that's a punishment to take it away from the person. So,
and that's wrong. We should, and that should be the standard.
Especially once they've been qualified as being okay.
Yeah.
has to actively do something to undo it, right? I mean, that is the same.
No. What do you think appropriate legislation? What is it? Why do they write that Congress shall enact appropriate legislation? Why bother writing that? Why write appropriate legislation? Why not?
Because, as you know,
because they knew what Congress would do, which is mostly write inappropriate legislation.
And because they knew nobody would, the laws aren't enough. No more slavery. That doesn't stop people. It's the idea you're going to prison for enslaving people.
Right, but but it also my point was that with respect to the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, that you sort of need to Congress had to sort of set up what the metes and boundaries are for when someone gets that disqualification attaches.
Yeah.
We have no idea
when
when it attaches. Does it attach as soon as you engage in the insurrection? Does it attach after a court of law finds you? Does a court of law have to find that beyond preponderance of the evidence, beyond clear and convincing evidence, beyond a reasonable doubt? Like,
what's the pathway back?
Does it have to be your peers? Does it have to? Well, the pathway back is expressed in that they say that the
but like
can take you back in. But maybe in theory, a court can do it also. I don't know. Folks.
Yeah, and how do you get Congress to do it? Is there going to be a procedure to get through? Like, there's an entire
There's just 1,000 questions that someone has when they're looking at this thing. That it's ridiculous for a state to start saying that we're going to start drawing up exactly where these metes and bounds are.
Amendments have express grants of congressional authority, but no one sits here and says, well, if Congress never passed a law banning slavery, slavery wouldn't have been banned. Those are permissive grants of congressional authority in addition to the self-execution. Wait, hang on 1 second. Do you think that the 13th Amendment was self-executing?
To the extent that it's broadening anyone's civil liberties, yes.
Okay, wait.
Well, you can't put that qualifier. Yeah, you can't put that qualifier.
Why can't I put that qualifier?
You 100% can. If I enslave somebody, how do you stop me? It just doesn't. Oh, hey, you're not like the Emancipation Proclamation actually free anyone.
Someone tries doing it. Yeah, I mean that's a fair point.
Yeah, no. Oh, the slaves are free. Okay, did that actually free any slaves? No. So it wasn't self-executing. It literally took men with guns to free the slaves. There was a second step necessary.
Right. But I'm saying as far as from the eyes of the law.
Yeah, under the eyes of the law, sure, but that's...
Which is, I think, what their point is, in the eyes of the law.
Well, but maybe, but even then it's like... They're
Am I-
arguing, okay, well, in the eyes of the law, but then in the application of that law, it's not true. But then that means that the
But
law
that's
is not
true.
being.
But
That
that's
means the
true of
law is
any law.
garbage.
That's just true of laws generally.
That's true of every
It's
law,
like,
right? You need an executive branch to enforce.
Yeah,
it.
well, but I think that's
point is
actually
that from a legal
that's
from a
I
legal
argue a
perspective,
philosophical
is it
issue there.
right? So, but the point is that from a legal perspective, is it self-executing? And my point is that there's a difference between things that are broadening civil liberties versus things that are not. And this is not something, as I'm about to point out, this is not my own distinction. This is what the Justice Samara raised in the dissent as being the most logical way of doing this. But we'll get there.
Bullshit.
I can't.
So
I don't know.
the-
Justice Samara put that qualification in, and he said that's consistent with. And he pointed out, if you went through his
No, for
dissent,
purposes
he
of due
pointed out
process,
that
wait, for
every
purposes-
single time that any court has before the Colorado court, that any court has tried to apply. If you look at it from this perspective, if you understand the 14th Amendment to be self-effective with respect to wherever it's broadening and protecting people's civil liberties, but not self-affecting if it's restricting people's civil liberties, then every decision we've ever seen in the 14th Amendment is consistent. And if you try doing it your way or any other way, they're inconsistent.
So I
If you
guess
have
the
a
question
right-
goes back
wait,
to
wait, wait,
is
wait,
Section
wait,
3
hang on a
restricting?
second. Very quickly for the 13th Amendment.
He will never give in on this point. He will never give in on this point.
Did people have a right to property with respect to slaves?
No, of course not.
What do you
I
mean?
think that was
As a legal
self-effective.
as a legal matter, were they
It's a
property?
legal matter. Now, I'm sure the people
Wait,
trying to
will
get
you
around
answer
that.
that
We
question?
start Jim Crow-
Will you
we
answer
start
that
Jim Crow
question?
laws. But yeah, I'm saying as a legal matter, do I think
Yes.
that right? No, I
The 13th
agree. I
Amendment
would
extinguished
I agree with you
that
that the moment
liberty.
we applied, every slave was legally freed.
I understand that you say that that's the result you like, but I'm attacking your analysis, which is you say that anything that promotes freedom, that's self-executing, but things that don't promote freedom are not self-executing.
Individual civil liberty.
What I'm trying to suggest to you is that there were individuals who had property rights, the most sacred right of the English common law, of property rights.
Individual civil
with respect to
liberties.
people, with respect to people, and the 13th Amendment immediately extinguished those rights.
Yeah, and your property rights don't mean jack compared to individual civil liberties. That's the point.
I
They
mean,
don't
a
get-
property right is an individual.
Listen to him now arguing that a slave owner's right is just as equal on a civil liberty scale to someone being a slave or not being a slave. This is an argument that he actually spends a considerable amount of time making with me, which was making me laugh.
yeah, I mean, it's just
The right
it's,
to own property.
yes, it is extinguished as a form of property. Like it's extinguished as a thing that is possible to own. You
Yeah.
know?
And I wish I had phrased it that way, because that's a better way of phrasing it. It didn't pop into my head, but you're completely correct. But they basically said it's an unownable thing. It's like all of a sudden, it's like all of a sudden if property, if your car turns into acid, you can't sit and drive in it anymore, no matter how much you're complaining about it. It's just not something you're capable of doing any longer. So too, you're not capable of owning another human once the 13th Amendment is passed.
That's not
individual.
you contrast that. So someone by your logic, if I decide to buy someone's heart, in that case, so I bought his heart so I can rip it out of his chest while it's still alive because that's my property. That's such an asinine.
Well, no one's
looking at the way anyone understands constitutional
no one's
law.
defending that. I think what Pisco's going after is your
That's what they're
characterization
saying.
of a civil liberty or characterization of removing civil liberties, right? Because the 13th Amendment at the same time removed the right to own human beings as property, right? While granting human beings the right to not be owned as property. So, your
Removing
distinction,
liberty from some people and giving liberty to others, for sure.
yeah. So
No,
your
because
distinction
It was
of
removing civil liberties, for sure.
And precise. You asked me earlier whether it's a fundamental right. I was just sitting there and I was telling you I'm loath to qualify right to run for president as a fundamental right because it is self-evident that certain fundamental rights trump other fundamental, what we classify as other rights. Whether you want to call it, and that's why I'm like, you want to call it fundamental right, fundamental right versus a right. Those are two different things. And that's what I'm saying. It's a property right. To call property right the same fundamental right as a basic right to liberty, I think is a joke.
well,
I
we're
think- I
not
think-
calling it the same.
I think
You said that certain when the Constitution removes civil liberties, right? That it requires an
It's
affirmative law.
Or
No,
No,
but I'm
but it
saying
grants, yeah.
it's broadening civil liberties.
Yeah, when you're saying when it's broadening civil liberties, but you didn't specify broadening fundamental civil liberties, and no one has specified.
I didn't have to because I never assumed that someone would be a sufficient jackass to come along and start saying that, oh yeah, property rights are the exact same thing as basic liberty from being owned. Like I just that those are the same level. That's the same interest level.
The distinction between civil liberties, ones that are more important than others, right? And what
You're right.
Pisco's getting at,
I did not clarify that. I thought that wasn't. I thought that was so implicit that I didn't have to. But if you need me to actually, if Pisco needs me to actually specify that a fundamental right is going to trump a non-fundamental right,
property is a fundamental liberty, isn't it?
and it's not a fundamental liberty the same way right to life and liberty are. It's not.
Wait.
fundamental.
The due process clause says life, liberty, and property, doesn't it?
Listen to him. He's still sticking to this, that your property ownership rights, your rights to $50 are the same rights as someone else has to not be in prison for their entire lifetime. Like that's essentially what he's arguing here. The exact same right. They're both equal rights.
It's a fun.
That's how desperate he is. I mean, he's advocating for slavery, essentially. That's what this leftist is doing. He's advocating that, why did we actually free them? That's not fair. That's totally unfair that we freed them. I don't understand. I mean, I was like, I can't believe I'm listening to this.
Property is textually specified as a civil right.
It's like, Pisco, I love you. You're arguing like a 10th grader here. I mean, you're basically pretending you don't understand.
How am I arguing like a 10th grader?
Because what I'm saying is, because you're trying to do a gotcha on something that everyone who's listening to this understands that your right to your life is more important than your right to your property. Your right to your own person is more trumps anyone else's right to their property.
No one's saying that.
And you're trying to be making
What's the relationship this has with the disqualification?
No one's because this entire dispute is about whether the disqualification provision is self-executing. And Good Lawgic was saying that constitutional provisions that broaden civil liberties are self-executing, but constitutional provisions that narrow civil liberties are not self-executing. You have to affirmatively pass a law for that to happen. And Pisco pointed out
that it makes sense. There are a few reasons that it makes sense, because think about this for a second. What is the yardstick? Let's say you come.
I don't understand. I guess
insurrection. And after I took an oath and that I engaged in insurrection, and I say that's a lie. I never did. Who's the burden of proof on? Is it on you? Is it on me?
Different question. So now we're moving off of the.
Well, I'm gonna
he's missing something obvious here.
Trying to understand
what's happening. We're just moving off the self-executing.
Notice how he has to keep cutting me off whenever I make a point.
It's not at all. That's the point of it being self-executing. Is it you're kicked out right now on the street, or do you have the right for them to prove you should be kicked out on the street?
There's actually a case. And it's interesting that you raised that, because that's going to come up very shortly.
Well, I know that, but that's
and the fact that one side is self-executing is in fact why the other side immediately is extinguished. Yeah. It's extinguished only because the other side self-executes.
Yeah, but yeah, Pisco's idea is, well, like if you elect me, well, what happens? Well, you have to stop me from being elected. You have to prove that I'm not entitled to be elected.
Right. Well,
it isn't just, like I said, it isn't just like you get thrown out on your hat.
Right.
They have to. Well,
I'm about to give him a history lesson on how this issue was actually addressed. But can you read that? I don't even know what this is. I don't even know what this is talking about. And I certainly don't want to be offensive to anyone who observes December 25th.
I think that was intended to be a little offensive too.
I'll say it. For five Canadian loonies. It's a lot of loonies. Or two and a half toonies.
That's worth what? Like a can of Coke in the US?
Right. Yeah, you get a cigarette. Hold on, Joe. I need to read it.
All right.
Okay. So Examoon's saying, Happy Jizmas, Joe. Hold on, I need to yes, just like Santa. Happy Jizmas, Joe. May jizzes leave jizz bottles near the crusty gray carpet on 4chan. This 4chan holiday takes place every December on the 26th. Ho, ho, ho.
I don't even understand what that means. Mike Rader says, Can't believe no one has mentioned that 14A3 says taking an oath to support the Constitution. The president doesn't make that oath. Congress does. President says makes an oath to faithfully execute the office. That argument has come up. I'll tell you right now, Mike, that argument has come up.
Mhm.
Trump's team has raised that argument. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this. And the reason I'm not a huge fan of this argument, I think this is one of the weakest arguments that he raised, and I'll tell you why. It's because when the Constitution says that anyone who's taken an oath to support the Constitution,
Mhm.
they're not going to give every version of the oath. So it's basically,
Yeah.
it's logical to assume that they're going to put in broad terms some oath that is in some way supporting the Constitution. So just because he happens to take something which seems like a deeper oath doesn't seem as if like, well, now he's not governed by that, because they're not going to label every type of oath. They want to, you have to realize they don't just want to cover the senators and electors and electors and members of the House, and arguably, according to the left, the president and vice president. They're also looking to cover some justice of the peace who works down in Chattanooga. So, and they don't know what oath they might have a little slightly different oath there, and they want the oath to they want whatever oath he made that was in general supporting the Constitution to be something that now he violated when he took up arms. So that's why I thought this was there's a lot of great arguments. I personally have never been a huge fan of that argument because that's how I read the stat. Reading it fairly, that's how I read the amendment.
It's a super weak argument, but I get you make all. It's like there's nothing wrong with saying, well, actually, it doesn't say X. And that's fine, because that's a valid argument to make. Is it a strong argument? No, it's weak sauce. I agree. Yeah, because it's like saying, you're saying he doesn't have to support the Constitution, and nobody would ever make that argument in reality. So
we can talk about this too.
When they're ratifying this amendment, they sort of have to think to themselves, okay, how's this actually going to work? Right? I mean, that you think that they weren't being stupid and just saying, well, this sounds like high.
Well, yeah, and how it actually worked. How it actually worked is that state actors and there was federal enforcement for sure, but there was also state enforcement.
Well, Marshmallow, thanks. I love you.
Really? That's fascinating.
So is this out of curiosity?
Would that change your mind?
I'm asking you this. How would you determine? How would anyone determine? Let me ask you, do we have to prove that Trump engaged in insurrection by preponderance of evidence, by clear and convincing evidence?
We can move on if you want, but I just want you to notice that we're moving on.
How could we self-executing when we don't even know what the yardstick is as far as determining that someone falls into this category of people?
Self-execution doesn't rely on a particular burden of proof. Self-execution could imply. I mean, think about this. Section 3 was enforced through expulsion votes. What's the burden of proof for like convincing a congressperson to get rid of George Santos or something? Is there any particular standard of proof there that's specified? No, but they enforced it through expulsion. And so for you to say that there's something incompatible about not,
you mean Congress enforced it through expulsion, not some court in Colorado?
Right, exactly. The point that's the point is that Congress did that.
Yes.
Yeah. Darko says, I bet Pisco never read Griffin. Oh, we're going to talk about Griffin. I'm gonna raise Griffin's, and wherein Chief Justice Chase literally stated 14A Section 3 wasn't self-executing, persuasive authority, but well written, and destroys his argument. I bring up Griffin shortly. That's gonna come up. And AD says, if some of the 14th sections were self-executing, and why was Section 5 included in the last portion of the amendment? So I think we touched on this briefly earlier, and I don't think we actually fleshed it out during our argument. So, and it's important to me to argue in good faith when I'm having this, even if I feel like I'm arguing with someone who's not necessarily arguing in good faith. Frequently, Congress, or especially if you have an amendment like this, like these amendments, like 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments, you have to realize that let's assume Congress wants to engage in writing further statutes. So you sort of have to ask yourself, well, technically, what is their authority to act and execute these various statutes? They have to have that authority. That under the Constitution, Congress is supposed to be. They're not in actuality, but certainly in 1870, they were far more. I mean, it was only in the 1940s when Congress's powers to legislate about virtually anything were broadened by the Supreme Court. But by and large, in the 1870s, if it was not express that they had authority, then they didn't have any authority to write anything. So Pisco can make a fair argument to me. And I recognize that someone could make this argument and say Congress would have had zero ability or right to execute, to legislate any further on these topics unless they expressly reserve that right for themselves, because it's not about interstate commerce. It's got nothing to do with what the federal Congress is supposed to be governing. It's supposed to be under state rights. So they would frequently put in there, into various legislation, they would put in there that Congress has the right to legislate further on this. However, they wouldn't say appropriate legislation. They would simply say legislate. And the reason you put in appropriate legislation is to point out that there's no scaffolding here. There's no framework for how this thing is going to work at all. And it's basically directing Congress to provide that framework. And that's something that we're going to end up talking about a little bit later on. Monk in training, leave it to the left Dems to argue for owning people. That's essentially what he was doing. It was hilarious. Even if you can see the 14th self-executing, Congress can vote to remove the disability. Ignoring this is to ignore due process. You therefore cannot remove him from the ballot. It's premature. Yeah, I agree with this argument, NY Renal. I agree with you that even though no one imagines for a second that Congress would remove this disability from him, why would this open up a door? We don't know that about anyone in the future. So why would anyone think that a state would have a right to remove someone from the ballot when it's something that arguably could be removed before he even takes office? So it seems like I agree with you. It's premature for them to do that. J-Rock, becoming a YouTube member and gifting. I'm going to give you one of these. Gifting 5 Good Lawgic memberships. Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you. I feel like I got a Christmas gift right there. Boom. That's a Christmas gift.
They should amend the Constitution to remove the natural born part of it.
They won't, because they're afraid of Elon running.
Or Ian running.
I'll give.
And additionally,
I'll
just so you
pack
know,
money for you.
your burden of proof argument applies to the other provisions of the Reconstruction Amendments as well. What's the burden of proof for showing an equal protection violation? What's the burden of proof for showing a procedural due process violation? Courts figure it out. They apply it.
What does Bubala? Think to yourself. I'm just trying to understand. First and foremost, you're comparing the way Congress self-regulates their own body to any other sphere of judicial decision making is absurd, because we see that the way
you might not have heard it because he was like we were talking over each other, but he started saying, well, they removed Santos and they didn't go through normal due process there, so that's a proof that I don't even know.
That's an acknowledgement. There's due process that wasn't adhered to.
No, but I think it's that the ability to strip someone of that power does not necessarily require due process.
Yeah, yes, but it's also as though
that's
Pisco's
the claim
arguing,
that he's making. That's the claim.
Well,
that he's
he's arguing that Santos's removal wasn't legal either, which is not what he would ever agree to.
Right, but yet it happened.
He's already painting. Now.
Right, so I basically now I'm responding to that claim.
Way Congress actually goes through to any other.
Let me go back a little bit.
Think to yourself. Like I'm just trying to understand. First and foremost, you're comparing the way Congress self-regulates their own body to any other sphere of judicial decision making is absurd, because we see that the way Congress actually goes through their processes has no relationship to the way any other court would operate itself. Look at the impeachment proceedings that we had, both impeachment proceedings that we had for Trump. Not a single piece of evidence was introduced in a way which would be accepted in a place that you're trying to get out of a parking ticket. I mean, there was zero testimony under oath that's trying to support any evidence in the second impeachment.
Well, but wouldn't that be real quick? Wouldn't that be
this is evidence? That's evidence. My point, the reason I bring this up, and I don't want to get into the whole impeachment issue, but the point I want to make to you here is that Congress operates by a completely different yardstick with respect to how they regulate their own bodies. You're coming here with evidence as to, well, look at what happened with
in my favor. Like, that's an argument in my favor.
Wait. Hold on. Wait. Real quick question. Wait. Real quick question. If Congress wanted to impeach Trump for something that was like a crime, right? We wouldn't use the statement, well, hold on, was there a criminal charge first? We would say that Congress has a way of going through this process, right? So if we say that like Section 3 of Amendment 14 is self-executing, and then you say, well, what would the standard be, or whatever question you would ask? Well, it would depend upon which body it was that was reviewing this particular thing. So if
But what about when it's going to be applied not by Congress? If it's being applied not by Congress, Congress has to set those meets and bounds up. Yeah, okay, fine. Congress, if Congress decides this person is not going to be admitted into the Senate, Well, good luck fighting that. It's like and they say that based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and we determined that he's disqualified. Good luck fighting that, because they have their own yardstick for how they operate. But that doesn't have anything to do with how someone outside of Congress is making those decisions, and the only people who can decide that is Congress. I don't think I expressed that here, because I was still digesting his question when I was.
For some reason, it came up in a criminal court. Well, then the standard there, I guess, would be criminal beyond a reasonable doubt. But if this came up in terms of like, does somebody get on a ballot? Well, how does somebody on a ballot determine your age? Right? There's not a criminal conviction required or any kind of probability, whatever. They would probably just look at a document and say, oh, well, look, boom. And then they would make that decision. Now, if we feel like the decision is unfair, then you would appeal it up the chain, which is what's happening. But nothing about a self-executing thing necessarily implies the need for a criminal charge or conviction prior to that. And I feel like the congressional example in impeachment just like makes the argument even a stronger case in favor of that, right?
Well, it was also understood at the time, unless, wait a minute. Here's where I'm... Good logic. Wasn't it understood? Wasn't it understood?
Let Lawgic talk real quick, because he's being attacked by multiple people. But then I won't talk as much, Renee. Sorry.
No, what I'm asking is then you're left asking, why is it that the amendment itself says that Congress shall enact appropriate legislation? Why does it say anything about that? I understand Pisco said earlier in response to this, he said, well, frequently we'll see in amendments that they'll sort of give Congress the opening of power in order to legislate in a particular area, especially when it's an area of law. And this does make sense. And when it's an area of law where they might not otherwise have a power to legislate, because while we tend to lose sight of this, there are federal Congress is supposed to be limited, even though they seemingly never are, as the areas of their purview. But so you can understand why
I don't disagree.
However, it would not have to say; it would just say legislate. The phrase appropriate legislation is designed to basically spell out what is, as Justice Samara, I'm not making up this language. This was a Democrat judge who dissented, who wrote rather eloquently in destroying the majority's logic, and saying, why are they specifically using a phrase in this amendment of appropriate legislation, unless it means that Congress is supposed to provide the scaffolding, the outer framework as to how this thing is supposed to operate. And for some single district judge out of the tens of thousands of judges across this country to say, oh, I'm the one who's going to sit here and come up with exactly what yardstick is appropriate. Let's see.
Hold on. Wait. Can I ask a question though? You're saying Congress. Wait.
It's such hubris.
Wait. You're saying that Congress is supposed to provide the framework, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Are you not biased a bit by the current composition of Congress? Like, because these particular amendment things.
I don't know how I'd be biased by the current composition of Congress when the Senate is run by Democrats.
Yes, the Congress which has a 2-vote lead. Yes, that Congress.
Yeah, it's a stupid.
Also, the other thing is, okay, Destiny. He's like, the only argument is, I'm sorry, Congress hasn't done their shit right for 150 years. Whoops a doodle.
Yeah. I think I say something to that effect. Most experts say SCOTUS will narrow its decision against Colorado and say Trump needs to be convicted of insurrection before S3 is attached. That's possible. Remember, in a presidential election, we elect electors to electoral college who vote for a candidate. How can the judges restrict this ahead of time? Well, they analogize it to keeping off someone from the ballot based on Article 2 issues like being under 35 or not natural born citizen or living here for 14 years. So that's how they analogize it. Much as states have that power, they similarly have a power to remove someone if they're disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So that's how they come to that conclusion.
Oh, Joe, I did also just want to say real quick,
Pisco's
tweet about how the Colorado, I don't know if you saw it, but I tried to make sure you saw it. The Colorado Supreme Court's logic is unassailable. That is flawless. There is never such thing as unassailable. It's like, that's just like saying a prenup is bulletproof. It's like, that's not how that works. And
it's such a
I don't know what Pisco does, but that. What?
It's such a rookie lawyer thing to say.
Well, that's also a junior associate who doesn't like. That's a guy who's never climbed into the trench before, saying like, "Oh, this should work. We should defeat the bad guys." It's like there's two sides to the shooting conflict. They both get like each side gets a say. Yeah. There's not like, "Oh, I file this motion, I win."
Yeah. No, I question that also. I hear myself echoing in your background there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Just letting you know.
things, these Section 3 things. You said it yourself. They went to Congress and they were evaluated. You're saying, well, Congress has their whole way of doing things. If it was like evaluated by like a simple majority for whatever the expulsion rules were, or even like 2/3, if the House was like 2/3, would you still be happy with that process that Congress is going through? Or would you say, well, hold on, we need like a different body to
Congress was supposed to be doing this. Congress was supposed to do this 150 years ago.
No. But I'm saying that particularly for Amendment 14 things, or when you want to expel people from Congress with relation to a Section 3 thing, you don't need like a criminal conviction or anything, right? These are just like expulsions that happen in Congress with their own process, right?
Oh, you're saying to expel Santos? You're saying?
Or yeah,
No. He's
or for you can expel people in relating to the
section.
the Section 3 part of the Amendment 14. I believe that happened in the past where people were expelled from Congress or something on it, or no?
Right, they were. There were 3 people. There were 3 people kicked out under Section 3.
Yeah, but none of those things required a criminal conviction, right?
I don't believe that they did require it.
Well, obviously they didn't, because if they did, everybody would just be citing that, and this argument would be over.
Again,
right?
that's Congress self-regulating.
Yeah, but like,
And
don't
Congress
all
does
of
that all
these,
the
but
time.
don't doesn't.
Congress does that all the
But
time.
I agree with you. But doesn't every single stage of like all of these processes have like
No, because that's their own Article 1 power.
regulating? Like, it's not like every single.
What was that, brother?
That's their own Article 1 power. That's completely different. What they have under Article 1, their rules to govern themselves, is different than the implementation of the 14th Amendment.
That's correct. That's a great point.
Congress's self-regulating ability is Article 1. That's a completely different provision of the Constitution.
Right.
Congress could do whatever the hell it wants to exclude people.
Right. And that's why I keep saying that they're a self-regulating body. They're the ones who make their own determination for how.
Yeah,
the
sorry, I didn't know
rules
if you said that
operate.
yet, but yeah, this part with Destiny, it's like.
But yeah, I don't think that he's trying. I don't think he has an agenda. I think he's trying to figure this all out in his brain. Like I didn't feel from him when I was listening, when we were engaging in this debate, that Destiny was like trying to push toward this side or that side. I felt like he was really trying to wrap his brain about what is actually true, which I credit him with that. So.
Single
apologies,
decision
keep
you
going.
make in terms of like who goes on a ballot requires it to be like ran through a court, right? So again, I would go for the age thing. Like if you're 33 and you're going to put yourself on a ballot and so like, sorry, bro, you're 33. Like, do I have to say, like, well, you need to prove that in court first? Or does that person just have the self-executing ability to say, no, sorry, like I can make this determination for myself. The process is me looking at it. Or maybe the process is a city court or a state court or whatever. And they decided, like, why would you not say that that's a legitimate way for them to review it?
And by the way, this is something that came up during the course of the hearing, and also in oral arguments before the Supreme Court of Colorado, where Scott Gessler was talking, where they kept hitting him with this particular issue. Like, if a state has the ability to remove someone who's 30, or keep Barack Obama from running for a 3rd term, why should they not be able to keep off someone who engaged in? Why should the Secretary of State not have similar power with respect to this amendment? And yeah, well, we'll hear a little further.
Like Cenk Uygur should be disqualified. Everyone agrees here, right? He should be disqualified. Cenk Uygur, the TYT.
The Young
guy,
Turks, he's a non-citizen running for
he was born
president.
in Turkey.
Yeah.
He wasn't born here. So you agree he should be disqualified, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Does Congress need to pass some implementing legislation?
I think Elon Musk. I'm not going to say because of political. I don't want people to interpret it as based on political basis. I think Elon Musk should be disqualified. Also, he's born in South Africa. He's disqualified.
So, does that require implementing legislation? And if Congress never implements something for the qualification then we just have to accept it.
You're comparing Article 2 of the Constitution to the 14th Amendment, which is such a ridiculous comparison.
They're both qualifications.
No, one's a disqualification, the others are qualifications. And he's trying to pretend that's the exact same thing because it's just semantics. But if you want to compare apples and apples instead of apples and oranges, in that case, you should look at disqualifications.
So you know what? By your argument, to the 25th Amendment. So I can come forward and petition that in my state that we should keep biting off, that the Democratic Party should be obligated to keep biting off because of the 25th Amendment. Let's go now have a whole procedure to determine whether or not he's sufficiently cognitive in order to qualify as being eligible. Under your argument, that's a completely fine argument for you to bring. Let's have it in all 50 states now. Let's start having each state determine for themselves whether or not he's had sufficient cognitive abilities to run the president, to sit as president.
I'm totally consistent on this. I'm totally consistent on this point.
Much like the 14th Amendment is not the same as Article 2. It's just not. And to say that, disqualification of the president sounds so asinine. Like you're very. you have your head buried so deep up your own sphincter that you can't even realize that you're.
Come on now, good logic. We had some good talks before. I know.
Wait. Can I just ask a quick question before this goes on? Wait, when you say that like you want to make this evaluation relating to his mental health or whatever, where is your source for that? Like, what is the source of law or what piece of amendment or whatever? Where are you drawing that from? That would need to be like some determination.
The 25th Amendment says that if he loses capacity, his insufficient mental capacity, that's a defect which makes him ineligible to sit as president of the United States. Vice president steps in for him. So
wait, Steve, I just want to bring up how ridiculous. I just want to say how ridiculous it is that you would bring this up, given that amendment specifies the exact procedures and who is allowed to make rules about the capacity argument and about getting rid of the president, acting president. That amendment specifies down to the body who is allowed to do what and which groups have to do it. And the fact that you would bring that up. The absence of similar type provisions in Section 3 is glaring.
Who's the third guy arguing with me? It's I don't know, some guy Mikey J. It's Alex, it's Pisco and some guy Mikey J. And there's another one, Josiah or something like that. Where it was basically me against this panel. Where I felt Destiny, like I said, I didn't feel Destiny was against me. I felt like he was just trying to learn and trying to just parse out who was speaking. Legitimately.
Right? The impeachment clause and the 25th Amendment both contain particular procedures for getting rid of the president. Section 3 omits that. We should read into that, shouldn't we?
Wait, real quick. Which amendment are we talking about? Just so I can read the thing.
25th Amendment.
Okay, I see. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the Congress may by law provide for the case of removal, death, resignation, or inability, both of the president and vice president, declaring what officer shall then be president.
It's a commitment.
Congress may, but why can't a state also? Congress may. They can also.
I'm pretty sure the 25th Amendment specifically says the vice president and the majority of the cabinet. They're the ones who make the determination.
And Congress can specify another branch if they want. And it's very clear about the separation of powers here. I mean, there's no. So if they didn't, so what you're saying basically is if that amendment was more generalized. In that case, it would be the exact same thing, and you would think that my argument would make sense. So you're basically trying to say that because there's language in there, 100%.
It finds that out. So you're saying that's what makes it different. But you don't say the same thing.
I can say
the language of legislation, the 14th Amendment.
Wait, Lawgic.
You ignore that with respect to the fact that they say appropriate legislation, the 14th Amendment.
It totally follows. If we pass the 25th Amendment and it's like, if the president is not in capacity, then he shall be no longer the vice president shall become acting president, and left it at that, wouldn't you agree that there's no default about who enforces that?
Well, what I'm saying is if there was something.
Wait, can you answer that? If it didn't specify anything, wouldn't you agree it seems to be a self-executing provision?
If what?
If the 25th
if it didn't
Amendment
specify.
Give me your language again, because I'm trying to picture.
Okay, the language is this. If the president be incapacitated such that he cannot perform his duties, then the vice president shall become acting president until such time as that incapacity is removed.
Mm-hmm.
And left it there. And then
I'm going to say on this argument, by the way, NY Reno, that I think I've thought about this whole thing. Does it apply to the president? Does it not apply to the president? I lean toward agreeing with you that it does not apply to the president. But I can hear, I can at least understand the argument that people make that it doesn't seem logical. It's because it seems weird to leave out president and vice president. It seems very, very weird. And then to rank him after senator and vice and electors, it seems very strange to have that order and then have officer apply to president. But I can understand that, like, if I was sitting on the other side of the aisle, like I think I would believe that there seems to be a lacking in logic. Why would they carve out the president from that? Like I can't come up with a philosophical basis. I can understand that textually. Textually I agree with you. Philosophically, I'm like, okay, I can try to understand what's going through their minds. Why the hell would they leave out the president? It seems crazy. The only argument to support that philosophically, and tell me what you think of this, guys. the reason to think that maybe the president is kept out of it is because he cannot possibly engage in insurrection. So I guess if you take that perspective, in that case, you could say that's why they left him out, because there's no such thing as a president engaging in insurrection, because whatever he wants to do, that's.
Well, I think that. Well, I need to jump in there. Sorry, Joe.
No, I'm asking you. I'm asking your thoughts.
Yeah.
So you're
Okay. Well,
actually
because I
doing-
think that. Well, you're kind of getting into this. Sorry, guys. I did once in a while. Political philosophy wise, that's almost arguing the king can do no wrong, and it's like, I like the president can't engage in you mean like Charles the First. You guys are unaware. Charles the First was the king of England back in the middle 1600s. Throughout most of it, he's the king that basically started. He's the reason why the English Civil War started. He was very heavy-handed with Parliament, and he was convicted of waging war against the people of England and the English people.
So you're saying there is such a thing. So
like
that
I think.
So by your
yeah.
argument, your argument in that case, so you tell me now, philosophically, if you want to try and read this text as saying
a president could have an
like the
insurrection
president.
against the government. A president could try to if right now Joe Biden said, I'm going to let the Chinese in and they're going to take over, is he not waging war against the United States government, its people?
But so now you're only making me that much more in a quandary, because I'm saying if you look at the text to me strongly leans that it's omitting the president. If you look at the rationale and we're trying to understand and assume that they're thinking logically, I cannot come up, based on what you just said, I cannot come up with a logical basis as to why they would carve him out of it. Like, why? Why would you carve him out of that?
I mean, I think there were some issues about, would that be insurrection or treason? I think that becomes an issue of like how you want to look at it. But I mean, I could see, the idea of insurrection being an open revolt against your nation. I mean, if he can't commit that insurrection, I think then obviously then you
just made the argument that King Charles I didn't.
Yeah, well, and that's what I mean. If you're going to make the argument he didn't, I don't see how that works. Like, I think because otherwise saying he can't do, like, you cannot go against your own country. I don't see how that works, because that's almost arguing the king is never wrong, and that's kind of like something through the English Civil War and the trial of Charles I, because he stood trial.
Yeah.
People might argue it wasn't a fair trial, whatever. That this idea of jurisprudence that the, people like popular sovereignty doesn't exist, because if he could do no wrong and the people have no authority over him, then how sovereign are the people if they have no ability to hold their
precisely and
sovereign accountable?
And to make that point even further, if a king could be guilty of insurrection against his own people, then a president, which we look at as being less than a king, certainly could be found to have engaged in insurrection against his own people. All the more reason that philosophically makes sense that they intended that he is listed in there.
Well, I wonder if they did. I don't know why they didn't include it, but I think that you're kind of getting back into the territory of, well, the oath argument that, well, it doesn't specifically say this oath. And it's like, well,
so you're
yes,
saying,
but,
so you don't like that argument. You don't like the whole, so you think the president is included in this?
I think he has to be because otherwise, if he's not like it, the oath argument, I think is not a very good one. This should apply to him, because if Jefferson Davis, nobody would ever want him. Like, no one, he shouldn't, like, would he be allowed to run? And that's
let's say 20 years later, he would, become popular in the North, and he wanted to run. Would he have been able to run for president?
I think he would have been able to run, but I think people would have tried to charge him with insurrection. Well, actually, I think he stood trial ultimately, and a bunch of Confederates did not. Like, a bunch of Confederates were not absolved, but ultimately, like, you should be convicted. But the idea that I can't as the sovereign commit a certain crime. I think you're now getting into is this a monarchy at that point? Because the king couldn't commit a crime. Yeah. The king was without stain, and
it's even more than a monarchy. It's a super monarchy.
Well, yeah.
NY Reno says, if you believe Colorado's December 14th amendment cripples the president, in the past his check was impeachment. Now any action could be seen as insurrection. Oh, I agree with you that this is opening up a Pandora's box of that's
it is
a massive problem with this.
This is a disaster, and I think your 25th argument is correct. Like, it's a fair argument to make. Like, well, they said there's rules in place. Okay, and by Pisco acknowledging that, Section 5 says Congress has to make the rules. So
precisely.
Yeah, I mean, it
Precisely.
does take care of that. But I'm just saying the idea of the president can be guilty of any crime. There's no crime the president cannot be held to be found. Like, he could commit any crime. There is no crime the president cannot commit. I would argue.
And,
Right.
you know,
Sorry, that's all I was trying to say.
Congress may, by appropriate legislation, regulate it here.
Right.
Don't you think that you could bring a claim in state court, be like, he's incapacitated?
Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem, because you're basically accounting for 1,000 different scenarios here in this type of, you're hypothetical. So then let's imagine that you literally, instead of, forget about President Biden, okay, but President Shaniqua, 30 years from now, has a stroke, okay, and basically, you know, isn't capable of communicating with anyone. So in that case, sort of wouldn't want to have a lengthy process as far as determining whether or not that person has capacity, as opposed to completely different from a situation like we have currently with President Biden, where it's like, look, there's some people who are actually pretending that he's not weakened at Bernie's type of level of incapacity, and others who recognize that, hey, this guy literally has no idea what question was asked him 30 seconds ago. So that's a far closer line. So it's not something that I would say that you should have being determined by 50 different states. I think that would make it.
I agree with you. I wouldn't want that law to be in place. I'm just saying the fact that the 25th Amendment specifies procedure should counsel against us interpreting
2024
that provision.
I know. I was thinking after I said it, why do we have to wait all the way to 2030 to have President Shaniqua? I want President Shaniqua next year.
Provision that's executable by the state governments or state courts. But the absence in Section 3 should give the opposite intuition, that unless there's some overriding evidence to the contrary, that this was never intended for that purpose.
I also, and I've got two questions. So again, this is because not being an attorney. Doesn't the language of the 14th Amendment in Section 3, isn't it like shall be there? No person shall be, not no person may be, not in the event of Congress enacting legislation. Isn't it like pretty declarative? And wasn't it understood at the time of the framing of the amendment to be automatically self-executing to Confederates without any sort of additional mechanism or legislation? Aren't these two things fact?
No. In fact, it was actually a court case that Chief Justice Simon Chase of the day said it's not self-executing.
Here we go. Let's get into Griffin. I'm about to teach us.
It's not only Griffin's case, but Congress had to pass the Enforcement Act. Because apparently they're like, well, shit, nobody's understanding how this works.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's good. You're good.
The Griffin case is a case that comes up frequently throughout this decision and in the dissent. So the Griffin case, just to give your listeners some context, this is what basically happened in 1870. So it was shortly after this amendment had been passed. And there's a guy by the name of Griffin who's convicted of murder down south. And he comes forward and he says, the judge who sat over my case is Judge Sheffy. He fought in the Civil War. And that was after he had already sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution. So I'm arguing that it's self-affecting. So since it's self-affecting, the day this was ratified, he no longer was a judge. He's ineligible to be a judge, and he's no longer a judge. And that decision he made, finding me guilty of murder, is no different than if my next door neighbor found me guilty of murder, because he's not a proper judge. Chief Justice Salmon said that's not the way this works. He said no, he doesn't lose his position the moment that was ratified, and that's something which is wholly inconsistent with the argument that's being presented here. That there's an assumption now.
It is inconsistent, but it's not controlling. It's not a controlling opinion. It wasn't the Supreme Court.
You're right.
You see. You asked Sean, how does he deal with Griffin? He's like, it's not controlling. It's not.
Well, that's a fair argument to say it's not. Stare decisis.
It's persuasive,
but it's also the only thing we have.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
To say it's like it's the only thing on point, and it's, it does say, like, we're talking about, oh well, what did it mean at the time? Okay, well, a bunch of these yokels in Congress at the time said something, and the judge who later became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court's like, yeah, Chief, that ain't what you think it is. Is important, and then I would argue then those same yokels a couple years later passed the Enforcement Act. Like, the fact these things happened show, okay, wait, we thought of, like, even if we thought
tried to look back and figure out Right, when we're trying to look back and understand
Yeah.
this amendment, what's happening around that time gives a
Yeah.
reflection as to what those people, what everyone understood
Yeah.
they were doing, was being affected as a result of these.
Yes, and then but we also have to look at their actions in the aftermath of it when they realize, oh my God, this actually didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Sure,
You're right.
and it's a bad
Right.
opinion.
I agree with
It's a bad opinion.
you, but you have to ask yourself.
It's a bad
This
opinion.
is what how people of the day understood what this amendment was supposed to be.
I
Supposed to mean.
disagree with
This
that.
is the chief legal mind of the day, Chief Justice Salmon. I mean, it's hard to come up with someone who you say this is a person who understands the law better, and he's coming to that determination. Is that binding? No. If it was binding, in that case, we never would have gone through this entire shenanigans.
All
in
right,
Colorado.
so wait a minute.
It's
So
totally
wait,
not binding.
what year was Griffin's case? Because I'm looking at
1970, I believe.
Okay, well, I just dug up the law review by William Bowd and Michael Stokes Paulson.
Two idiots.
Oh my God. Okay. Why is it? This is not a lawyer talking. Why is I hate to say this, guys out there, no offense to you. Why is some jack off like, oh, I'm WebMDing my way through fucking Section 3 of the 14th Amendment? Like, no, I read a legal law review opinion. But
to be fair,
yes, the 14th Amendment scholars.
To be fair, throughout this decision, they're referred to as the 14th Amendment scholars. And whenever the people say that, and you look at their credentials, they literally did not start writing or saying
the insurrection officials
until after January 6, 2021. That's when they started, hey, let's become scholars on this, and then we're going to be cited. So all they basically did was they opined.
It's an appeal to authority.
They opined about this 10 minutes before the rest of us. So now they're the authorities. It's a joke.
Yes, I'm a doctor of Hitlerian studies at the Insurrection Institute. This is definitely Hitler.
The definitive law review on this. And if you go to page 21.
Wait, pause again. The definitive fucking law review. Like, you're lucky I wasn't on there because I would have said
the definitive law review article.
I'm sorry for saying that on your channel, Joe, but I would have been like, nigga, please.
It's like I disagree with the Supreme Court justice who weighed in on this. But you know who got it right? These two jackasses who wrote a law review article a year and a half ago. They're they're the real scholars. The real scholars are not the Chief Justice of the day. No. Silly you. Well, do you think Chief Justice Salmon Chase, do you think that he actually invested the level of time and understanding into this the way that Bud and Paulson did 16 months ago? Because I don't. So stupid.
Next, they're going to cite the definitive bathroom graffiti.
Yes. Oh my God, I am so sorry, Joe. I can't believe that was actually that is what, guys. And just so you know, out there, normies, I have nothing but love for you, nothing but love from the streets. But this is like WebMDing stuff.
I can't hear you. You sound like you're at the other end of a tunnel. So on page 21, footnote 59, they say that indeed, for what it's worth,
audio, you can send me a link to come into to StreamYard or whatever it is, because I don't like the way I'm set up and structured here. I'm much happier to come in if you want to send me a link, Destiny.
There's no StreamYard. It's just his room.
So it says the legislative history supports this understanding. Section 3's opponents criticize the proposal for its immediate consequences on former Confederates. So maybe there was a challenge to it under Griffin's case a couple of years later, but apparently the framers of this amendment understood and complained about its immediate effect on former Confederates. And again, Pisco, you correct me if I'm wrong, because you have quicker recall on this than I do. Wasn't it understood by thousands of former Confederates at the time of its ratification that they were ineligible for office? It's not like all of these.
I totally agree with Josiah, 100%. There was never this expectation.
That is scary that an attorney's agreeing with some normie. You shouldn't be.
This is like the ultimate circle jerk. It's like I agree with him, he agrees with Borden Paulson.
Yes, I agree with these. I agree with the random normie quoting legal stuff like, "Oh, you're 100% right." It's like, I would have been like, "You got to be careful going to a law review homes."
Yeah, well, I'm about to have audio issues, so I'm going to be dropping off in this thing very soon. But
these people were going to be given, like, I don't know, criminal trials, or we're going to deal with thousands of these individuals in some set process. Everyone understood that they were disqualified. They didn't even choose to run. And there was never
an expectation that it would be up to the states to determine who the heck was eligible and who was not.
Says who? Says no one. Everything else is
anyone who understands anything about the Civil War.
Hold on, wait. He's saying says who? Well, if it's that ambiguous, then how do you know they have the right? I mean, is Pisco now turning into a 9th and 10th Amendment supporter?
Apparently,
Like,
apparently. The
I mean, but even then, it's not like that, right? You know, Congress shall make the appropriate laws, so there's no more 9th and 10th Amendment issue here. So, says who? Congress, when they wrote their own amendment saying we have the right to make the laws.
Get him.
God almighty.
What does the South call the Civil War? They call it the war between. They don't call it the Civil War. They call it the war between the states. That's what they called it. There's
They
a
call
whole
it the War of
there's a whole
Northern Aggression.
argument put forward, which I personally don't agree with, but it's an argument that's put forward by many Southerners, which is basically to the effect of that this was not a war about slavery, but it was a war about the powers of
What's the relevance of that?
My point here is that there definitely was a strong contention that this was about the individual sovereignty of states. And now you're going to tell me that, and this is where I started at the very beginning, you're going to tell me that these sovereign states, according to Colorado now, what they're saying is that every state is sufficiently sovereign that they can determine whether or not this is applying to an individual.
That is exactly what I'm telling you. Wait, that is exactly what I'm telling you. Wait. I'll explain why. I'll explain, because you're essentially, it's absurd to think that they were going to trust this enforcement to the southern states. That's what essentially your argument, right? It's absurd to think that they would.
I think it's asinine to think that you're going to have them sit in judgment of themselves to determine who the heck is an insurrectionist.
All right, I'll respond directly to that. So point number one is, as we mentioned before, it proves too much because, of course, all the other provisions of the Reconstruction Amendments are all.
Can I say I hate his voice?
That they can be enforced by the states, and so.
Who, Pisco's voice?
Yeah.
Is that like an anti-gay thing you're saying because of the lisping that he's doing, or is it something
it's not
else?
a lisp.
It's
It sounds
not
like
really
he has
a
a
lisp,
retainer
it's
in.
like-
It's retainer.
Yeah,
voice.
it sounds like a retainer or a wet sound. It's not like a lisp because a lisp is a th sound. This is a wet sound.
Okay, then yes, you can say it.
And I didn't know the guy's gay.
Now that we
like,
clarified.
that's not a-
Is he?
that's
I
not
just thought
anything.
he. I
don't know if he
I
is
just thought he has
either.
a retainer.
I assume,
Yeah, just-
I assume from his voice that he.
If it's a
So,
retainer, fine, that explains it, but it's still really unpleasant to listen to.
Mm.
Like I got
you got,
earphones in. That's right in my ear.
you can actually feel the fluid like gushing into your.
Yes,
like,
no.
rolling it.
Here's actually Congress didn't say that.
You should use that for your Nancy Pelosi voice.
Your argument
That's
That
proves too
ignores
much because.
my distinction.
Okay.
That ignores my distinction.
Yeah, your distinction is bullshit. But just to go on, move
Your
on.
distinction's
Why-
bullshit.
Why do you think it's BS? Why? Why would it be
We just
BS?
went through the whole thing of why it's bullshit. In that you're totally made up, non-textually based, feels-based argument that rights providing or liberty expanding things, those were self-executing. Those were expected to be done by the states based on nothing, based on feels, based on no text at all to support that distinction.
No, actually, I didn't come up with
Totally
that argument.
unavailing and
I did not
flies
come
in
up-
the
I
face
didn't-
of-
No. You see, you're pretending that I made that up because of some sort of MAGA perspective or something like that. That helps out Trump. And what I'm saying
I
to you
didn't
is,
say MAGA. I didn't say MAGA. I just said not
okay,
text
so you're
based.
saying
It's not
when
text
I don't know
based.
if you're saying feels best as it's implying.
And now I can't listen to him anymore. Now I hear it. Now I just keep hearing it. This is all your
Hear
fault,
that
Ron Cole.
retainer
Now
bouncing off his.
now I hear that retainer bouncing around his mouth and his lips, and I'm just picturing like what's happening inside his mouth, and I'm getting all grossed
Did your
out.
kids ever have a retainer, Joe? Any of your
Yeah.
kids?
I had a
So
retainer for a while.
It's taking you back in time, isn't it? You're like, oh my god, I sounded like this.
I had a retainer like a year ago when I was getting when I was using Invisalign. So
Oh,
yeah,
Yeah, but did you stream with the retainer in?
nope.
yes, you would have sounded like this.
I guess so.
That's where my feelings are
No,
leaning.
it's
What I'm saying.
implying that it's not based on any law. It's not based on text. No, there's no.
Oh,
basis.
it's based on far better law than anything you have because it's consistent.
What's the law? You're just saying
far
it
as the law.
feels better. I don't know what to say. Like
No, it's consistent with everything. Like every decision ever
Yes.
until the Colorado case.
I have a judge who says I have a judicial opinion commenting on this. You don't.
Yeah.
what is your?
You have law professors hypothesizing.
Yeah, I have Justice Samauer.
Or
That's
Well, you have
saying
also
this
Selma
is not-
P. Chase.
This was not my novel idea. I do recognize it as being rather insightful, but the idea the first time I heard this argument was from Democratic Justice Samauer in his dissent. This is exactly what he opens with. He said, "This is
For purposes of due
changes and
process."
changes. Did you
Wait,
read
no.
the dissent? Did you read the dissent at all?
Of course I did. Wait, hang on a second. I read this.
Of course I did.
Of course I did. And that dissent is based on due process. And there, it actually you can make sense, right? It can make sense for why certain procedures might be required in for certain kinds of because it's always been a balancing test, right? Due process has always been understood. At least I shouldn't say that. In the 20th century, was understood more and more to be a balancing test where different provisions, different rights can be played off each other, and it can be a kind of loosey-goosey balancing test. That's not a jurisdictional question. That's not a self-execution question. It's a question about due process. And essentially, my response to you is there's no basis in the text to support that. Well, for these, liberty enhancing provisions, those ones are self-executing.
Wait, real quick before you finish that. Wait, can you respond to that first part of that, Good Logic? Because it seemed like you were citing the dissent there to prove a point, but it seems like the dissent wasn't questioning whether the state had the jurisdiction, but they were just saying that it was a matter of due process.
Which that's not true. The dissent specifically was questioning that. That's Pisco completely misreading what the dissent wrote.
Yeah.
They may have questioned it in dicta in terms of
No, they may have questioned it. But they may have questioned it. But that part's not important.
Yeah, no. And it's the dissent questioned in dicta. And I'm about to hit him on that. You
know about this, but they didn't decide as a matter of law that state courts don't have that authority. He was saying that his whole point was the procedures we provided were not comporting with the due process clause. Assuming
I don't understand how you apply the term dicta to part of a dissent when in theory every part of a dissent is necessarily dicta. So you're saying that's part of the dicta of what he's saying. Those of you who don't understand the term dicta,
okay, yeah. What I mean to say is it's not part of his legal conclusion.
He just realized that I just like call him out for being like.
Yeah, this is an opinion I disagree with.
No,
and also now he's like at least now Pisco's not contesting the idea that due process was violated here at all either, which is interesting.
Well, so I just want to explain to the audience here because most of them are likely unfamiliar with the term dicta. So frequently you'll see, particularly in lengthy decisions, that there will be there's the essence of the rule of law, and then there's a lot of other talk that's in there. So that talk, which is not part of the rule of law, not necessarily part of the order, is referred to as dicta. So we say, so if someone cites a part of a decision which is not part of the essence of the final finding of the court, a lot of times the opposition will say, well, that's not really binding, that's dicta. It's a way of saying that's the extraneous where they're just going off, but it's not really something has the force of law. That's what the phrase dicta means.
Yeah, they were off on a tangent.
When it comes to a dissent, there's no such thing. Everything is dicta because the dissent lost. So there's no law that's there. Every word that he's writing is technically dicta because it's just he's expressing his thoughts on something that is not ultimately the law because he lost and he was outweighed by a majority of the judges who are overseeing the case. So that's why I was like, how the heck do you say that was the dicta of this guy's dissent? Like that doesn't even make it. It's not even English.
Yeah. I mean, the entire dissent is the dicta of the dissent by definition of what a dissent is.
Yeah. That's what I was hitting him on. And so now he starts walking that back.
The conclusion is, you're right, I misspoke. His legal conclusion depends on the procedural due process question, not on because assumingly, right, and I don't know what you would think about this. If Colorado had provided much more process, he would have been in the majority, wouldn't he?
No. He said there is no process. Not if they had. He said there is no process that is available.
Had they provided much more? There is no process hearing for this. It's an administrative hearing.
Yeah, there was Ian. There was a dissent, and we're talking about Justice Samara, who was one. It was a 4-3 decision, and each of the dissenting judges wrote a dissent, and and I actually went through Justice Samara's dissent on Locals, which is at goodlogic.locals.com, and I started going through it on stream here on YouTube, and then I got to like the real meat and potatoes of it on Locals, and it's very eloquently written. It's a really brilliantly, like, there's so many concepts they throws out that are very insightful that I personally had never thought of before, as far as arguments as to why the approach of the majority made zero sense. And he happens to have a very eloquent pen. Some judges just write better than others. He writes better than I write. His pen is very eloquent, and his ideas are insightful. So I mean, he's using terms that I'm Googling, trying to figure out, like, what's a Blistering lacuna. Do you know what a blistering lacuna is? Because I had to Google that one.
I
had
know what
to
a
Google
lacuna
that.
is. I don't know what a blistering one is. Like a lacuna is a gap in the
Yes,
text.
very good.
Yes.
Very good. That's correct.
Yeah,
So-
I had to. Yes,
How do you blister a lacuna?
I think it's
I
like
think
blisteringly
an
obvious
adjective.
or glaring.
I think it's an adjective in this context to the
Yes.
lacuna. The
I
lacuna
think-
is so open.
Or maybe he's confusing it with a
Blister.
different kind of hole. I don't know.
But he basically was saying that
That
there's a-
just hurt Sean.
yeah, but I'm saying his concepts and the way he was understanding things was really insightful, and he happens to write very eloquently, which is another reason you
Yes.
can appreciate him. So that's why I was like, dude, like you're sitting here arguing with him as if you're like anywhere in the same stratosphere as he is. It's just a joke. But
Nope. He actually says the exact opposite.
What you would think about this? If Colorado had provided much more process, he would have been in the majority, wouldn't he?
Nope. He actually says the exact opposite. You need to reread that this time, my friend. He says the exact opposite because he questions whether or not Colorado would have that authority.
Wait,
He says,
no.
I
but
don't.
He does
He
not.
questions
He does.
whether if Colorado had specifically
That's what
written,
I mean
this
by
is
the
how we will handle. This is how we. He spends dozens of pages excoriating how it's impossible to use the existing Colorado statutes to try and do what this court has done,
For
and how it did.
procedural due
how it was
process
not
reasons.
You're correct.
What you're bringing up is
Procedural-
self-execution. What you're bringing up
No,
is self-execution.
You're right, but he also says, let me finish. He also says that even if the state of Colorado, that one questions whether Colorado ever would have had a right to do this if they were so inclined. They certainly did not. They certainly didn't. Were not so inclined. They didn't do it. And that's a problem he had.
the point that I should have, the word I should have used is whether the legislature had the authority to do it. Justice Samara questions whether if the legislature of the state of Colorado had specifically written a formula for how they wanted to address any time an issue would come up with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And they had written out this whole lengthy process that if this happens, we're going to approach it this way. And you could see something like that happening. I mean, just think about this for a moment. In the wake of January 6th and the wake of all these proceedings, you can easily foresee that the state of California, or the state of Idaho, or some state out there is going to decide, you know what? We don't really have in our current electoral election law processes any way for dealing with this in the future. So let's write out exactly a set of statutes that will be fair in order to assess in the future if Section 3 of the 14th Amendment comes up and someone raises this issue, how we would address it. And the legislature writes that entire thing. Would that be constitutional or not? Would that actually be effective or not? And Justice Samara concludes it would not. So now he might be wrong on that, but his perspective on the law is that no state actually has the right to do it, and furthermore that Colorado never tried doing it, and then you try basically shoehorning a square peg into a circle.
But it's a question as to whether or not they ever would have had that right if they were so inclined, because he's very hungry about that language, which you keep conveniently forgetting.
That's an open. So when I said dicta, what I mean to say is he did not say there is no self-execution. He did not say that states don't have the power to enforce. What he said was what we provided was not sufficient due process rights. But you're pretending that his opinion was saying that it's obvious that Congress is the one with the exclusive authority to enforce.
So good logic. I asked you this earlier, and I don't think I got an answer to it. So if you don't mind just clarifying.
By the way, when this guy was talking to me, I actually thought it was Destiny because he sounds a little bit like his voice sounds like
kind of does, yeah.
So I didn't even realize that I was talking to somebody named Josiah. I thought it was Destiny the whole time.
Yeah. So I want to make sure I understand this correctly as a non-lawyer. So when Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says shall, no person shall be, and then in Section 5 it says Congress shall have the power to enforce by sufficient legislation, blah blah blah. You're telling me, are you telling me that in the absence of federal legislation, Section 3 is inoperative? It's just it doesn't exist.
Yes.
What I'm saying to you is,
can you answer it? No, yes,
I'm pulling up the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment right now. So I'm going to look at what you're saying with the shall that you're reading and how to interpret. So give me a second here.
Sure.
Amendment.
I mean, yes.
Section 3
And while you're doing that, I'll also point out that in the majority opinion in the Colorado Supreme Court, they do
Not a
cite
lawyer.
cases. Apparently, I think it's like the civil rights cases, which is like in the mid 1880s, that say that or that the 14th Amendment is self-executing as long as its terms are met. It does not require any ancillary legislation.
Well, what terms were met in Section 3?
Right. As I
What was that, brother?
What terms were met in Section 3? And
Oh,
what
I don't
terms were met under Section 5? Its terms are met. Okay, well, what are the terms?
That's what I'm about to get to.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. AD says Jefferson Davis was pardoned. Does Section 3 remove the president's
He
power
was,
to pardon
yes.
someone with disqualification disability?
But not initially.
Right. Why are we arguing about whether he's disqualified or not, and not about the fact no insurrection took place on January 6th? So this is an interesting question, because I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to be fair with you. Anytime I've ever described January 6th, and I've heard people refer to as an insurrection, I'm like, you're a jackass, and that's a ridiculous perspective to take. Yeah. The one thing that has come out of this, and it's given me a lot more time to sort of fixate on when something qualifies as an insurrection, because I always, and the reason I always was very critical of anyone labeling this an insurrection is because I looked at insurrection as having some sort of coordination, not some mass of people who are looking to like what we saw on January 6th.
You and I talked about this a couple nights ago.
Right. And I'll tell you this much. Like, after hearing these oral arguments, I recognize there are definitely 3 levels. There's a revolt, or maybe 4 levels. You call revolt different from a rebellion, but let's pretend revolt and rebellion are the same for a moment. There's revolt, there's rebellion, which is definitely beyond insurrection, and then you have a riot, which is definitely, in my mind, not an insurrection, and somewhere in the middle there is insurrection. Now, where do you label something an insurrection? Would I call what happened on January 6th an insurrection? No. Do I think anyone who went in there and broke the law, which I don't think they should have done, but whoever did, that they're an insurrectionist? No. But I have to recognize that it is a fair point to say that it doesn't have to reach the level of being a revolt in order for it to be an insurrection. So for someone to on the left to label it an insurrection, I'm less bothered by it after sitting through these hearings and thinking through the terms than I was 3 months ago when I heard.
I disagree, though,
and you can disagree. And like I said, I wouldn't label it an insurrection. I think it's wrong. I call it a siege. But
well, I'm just saying, though, Joe, if you do that and you're willing to let that slide, we're getting back to the ideas of, well, was it the incite? Like, I think you have to maintain on all of that, because if it was an insurrection, well, now we're getting into like engaging in it. Well, no, it's the issue of if you're going to label this an insurrection, then a lot of things become insurrection, and that's not appropriate. Because like I said, if I burn down the 3rd Minneapolis precinct because obviously I'm trying to get the government to do what I want through violence and a mob.
One could call what happened at Chaz.
Yeah. It's 100% an insurrection.
So you call that an insurrection?
Oh, I think it was wholly an insurrection. I think that the president could have J-damned that place to the ground. They're insurrectionists. I could have gone in there based on their rules and based on the way that the state of Washington has treated it. People have been murdered there and nothing happened.
Right.
And I think it has to be much more than either of those.
Yes.
Because I don't want to see them declaring like the Million Man March to be an insurrection and so forth.
But
I'm with both of you, gentlemen. I don't think this was an insurrection.
But I'm just saying,
what I'm saying is, I definitely can understand it better today, because I do recognize it's less than a revolution. Yeah. So in that case, you sort of, if you want to come up with a definitive thing, you can't just say, I don't like the result of how this will impact Trump. You have to, intellectual integrity demands that we actually try to come up with some way of defining a distinction. So I'll ask both of you, tell me what the distinction is between a revolution and an insurrection, that this is neither of them. And then how this was less than both of those.
I would argue an insurrection really isn't any different than a revolt or a revolution ultimately, because you're looking to unseat power for a different one.
So then why does the amendment say insurrection or revolution?
Because I think that as much as they thought they were doing this right, they fucked it up.
You think
Because
that
like
amendment
I
is
go back
poorly
to-
worded?
Like, yes, because remember, they said what they said. Yes, but then they also realized, oh my God, we have to invoke a law within like 10 years of passing it. They had the Enforcement Act. So obviously, apparently it wasn't that good and it wasn't fully understood.
Yeah, but that
because-
could have been part of their whole
Mm.
Congress passing further legislation.
Yeah, but I think that if they thought it wasn't necessary, they would have said it wasn't necessary. But I mean, obviously they realized, well, this isn't necessarily 100% clear.
So you think they're exactly the same? Do you agree with that, Ian? That they're the same thing?
I think that it's one of those examples where they're over listing, if that makes sense, and they do this in legislation all the time. You know, they say no livestock or farm animals. You know, and it's like, well, you're talking about the same thing, really, but you're just trying to avoid any distinction. Because the other thing you see when they don't do that is that somebody says, "Oh, it's not it's not a revolution; it's an insurrection." But I mean, I think that both of those were intended to refer to something larger than a protest, and even a protest that gets wildly out of hand.
And the reason here's the problem I have with that, because again, I really try. I'm not trying I really try to avoid starting with the result and then working my way there based on what result works for me, because I try to make sure I'm avoiding that. So if you're going to tell me that there are excess words here of insurrection or rebellion, and that the insurrection or the rebellion is excessive, and that really once you cross that threshold of insurrection, whatever it is, that those both mean the same thing. And like Ian's saying, livestock and farm animals are the same thing, and that they do this. I think they might do that in statutes. I don't know if that happens in amendments so much. And the reason I question this is because
you think the amendments are really all that well written?
I'll tell you that I think they put much more time and effort into them. And the reason if I'll tell you what, if both of you gentlemen disagree with me, and you think that they just throw in words loosey goosey, then someone on the left can fairly.
Let's talk about the Second Amendment.
Let me just pause
which has a preamble.
Let me finish my point. I'm almost done. I'm almost done. I'm like 20 words away from it being done. If you're correct that words in these amendments are just thrown in there loosey goosey, in that case, you cannot then come back and say, why does it say appropriate legislation? It should just say legislation. Because someone on the left will be like, well, just like you're saying those words are thrown in loosey-goosey about or rebellion, so too the word appropriate is just a loosey-goosey, and it just means anyone can write legislation, and Congress can be one of them. And the whole fixation on the phrase appropriate legislation is an inappropriate thing. You either have to scrutinize these words as if they're practically gospel, or you can't scrutinize any of it as if it's proper, as if it's gospel. That's just being intellectually honest.
I mean, all of it is just us trying to do our best to understand what any of this was supposed to mean, because we don't get to go back and ask questions about all of this. And so you end up with, the Second Amendment is the whole militia thing part of the preamble, which to me seems obvious,
right?
That it's a preamble.
Right.
But other people are like, no, that's intended to be like a limitation on it.
Right.
Which is stupid, because like the notion of a right to a government militia is idiotic. But like the government doesn't need to write itself rights. But yeah,
well, I'll tell you this much: it's fair for you to read it that way. It's fine for you to read it that way. I'll tell you that I personally look at the Constitution with more of a gospel type of perspective, that every word in the Constitution has a purpose behind it, and that I assume that they hotly debated word by word, much as they did in the Declaration of Independence, that they hotly debated every word, and that there is likely a distinction, and that based on that, I'll let you go in a second. Based on that, for me to feel comfortable with this, I need to have a distinction between the terms insurrection or rebellion, and then ask myself, so once you cross the insurrection threshold, why would you say or rebellion? It should just say insurrection. And I have an answer for that, in that it's right after the Revolutionary War, and they don't want that to be labeled just an insurrection, so that's why they're throwing in both of them. So maybe that's why they want to be crystal clear. But I still think that there is a difference. In my personal opinion, of understanding the law, to me, it makes sense to say that there is a rebellion that's over here and a lesser level type of uprising, which is more than a riot, which is labeled insurrection. I'm just simply telling you what philosophically makes sense to me. Now you can respond.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I will say is to argue, I would argue the time frame, deliberation, effort, and work that went into the Bill of Rights is going to be a little different than the 14th Amendment. Sure, they were trying really hard to do what they wanted and make sure they were, they thought they were doing good work. But I would also argue part of the 14th Amendment was these were the victors deciding, like, we won the Civil War, so now we're writing the terms.
Right.
Whereas during the Bill of Rights, it was like, hey, we all won together. We're all on the same team. You guys the Anti-Federalists disagreed, so let's sit down and figure this out. So I would argue that's just a big distinction in how the amendments are drafted and who drafted them. But yes, the idea of insurrection or rebellion, well, is a rebellion worse than an insurrection? Sure. Why do we have to say the minor offense plus the severe offense? Why am I going to just say insurrection?
And I gave an answer to that. I gave an answer.
I get that. That's where
my answer is because we want to be clear that even if it's a minor level, relatively minor level of insurrection, that would be enough to disqualify you. But let's not lose sight of the fact that there was just not a mere insurrection, but a rebellion called the Civil War.
Well, yes.
So that's why I think they might have thrown in the greater offense on top of the minor offense.
And then I will say, Chanzig earlier said, my argument could be they were just idiots about it. Yes, that's a frequent argument is when you're debating legislation is the people who draft this had no idea what the hell they were doing. And courts will say that from time to time. It is not clear what the legislator intended. It is not like this is nonsensical. So that does happen. Like we are men and these people are no different than us. And all the things that may happen, Dunning-Kruger, like how can anybody get this wrong?
I'll give you a frightening thought.
Yeah.
100 years from now, my great-grandchildren will be dissecting the words of AOC.
Yes. Yeah. and Fetterman.
I mean, assuming that she writes anything that isn't,
that gets
forgotten.
Right.
Well, her tweets, they'll be cataloged as an anthology.
What a terrifying thought.
But that's just my point. Is that to argue that they were without fail is not proper. Like, yes, they were trying really hard. But people try real hard all the fucking time. Like, I could try real hard to make some sushi right now. That doesn't mean it's good sushi. I'm trying real hard, boss. Okay, that your best doesn't cut it.
They're supposed to be like the top lawyers of the day, you would think.
Well, yeah, I know that, but the top lawyers of our day are a bunch of bumbling dipshits. So
some of them are called,
so like
argue with on YouTube.
Some of them are on YouTube right now.
Right.
Yes, but that's
hey folks.
I guess that's my point of though, just being careful about how, because also think about the people that were doing the Reconstruction stuff. We don't have like those guys aren't on the dollar bills. Like nobody really knows them. It's because like, they were kind of muddling their way through it. But to argue that to put them on the, to put them up there with like Hamilton and Madison, and I think you have to be very careful about that. And I think it's also fair to say nobody is infallible.
Right.
That's I guess that's all. And Sylvia's right. I'll shut up.
Let me get some of these super chats here. Eric asks, why are we arguing about whether he's disqualified or not, and not about the fact no insurrection took place? We got that. Got this one. Malcolm says, Destiny's lawyer friends are total paperweights. Next time you should bring Leo on and play good cupcake with these guys. Leo was a bit much for me. He was a bit much for me. J-Rock, my man.
Yes.
Another 5 memberships. God bless you, my brother. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Aye Kunamata. I don't know what that means. Lakunamata? I don't know. Whole point of Second Amendment is in case you need to overthrow the government. Their argument is that on the date it was attempted, people who have tattoos, posters, carvings of Second Amendment came unarmed. Crazy. Yeah, I agree with you. I'll tell you this much. I don't think anyone there thought this is an insurrection. I don't think anyone who's engaging in it was thinking this is an insurrection.
Oh,
I would have expected a lot more ARs if that was the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think insurrection has to have intent. So that's another reason that I think that.
Yeah, and that goes to the unity thing. Like the guy sitting at Nancy's desk. Yeah, he like, oh, I'm the new Speaker of the House now. Like, no, he didn't think that. And the lecturing guy wasn't like, this is it. I'm gonna be like the guy standing on top of the Reichstag with the flag waving it at the end.
No, it's just people taking pictures because they're like commemorating a stupid moment.
Yeah.
I mean, protests get out of hand all the time. People burn stuff. People, and like, in Canada, we had the trucker convoy where like some people wrote up this idiot manifesto going, "We demand the government step down," and whatever else. I'm like, that still doesn't make it an insurrection because they're just there protesting. They're a bunch of idiots who don't understand like how the process works.
Yeah, every protest wants the government to quit.
Yeah, that is literally like, I don't know when the last time I saw a big protest that didn't have people calling for the government to step down.
There's never protests saying, "Oh my God, we love you. You're so awesome, Mr. Prime Minister."
Yeah, it's
okay, so let me just get to the last of these and start working our way towards landing our plane here. Pelosi conspired with General Milley to remove Trump's control of military at January 6th in line of succession. She's an insurrectionist, not eligible. That's a fair point. That's a really fair point. Filthy Casual Gamer says, "Hi Joe, big fan of your content. / struggling financially. Probably should be sending a super chat. All are you doing the code for locals? No social media. How can we reach you? goodlogic@gmail.com. Hit me up at goodlogic@gmail.com if you want me to send you a code, and I will send you one. Okay? goodlogic@gmail.com. And locals is goodlogic.locals.com. If J6 was a real insurrection, they would easily still be holding the Capitol 3 years later. I don't know about that.
I suspect not. Because they go in with a bunch of ARs. I don't think they would have liked what happened 3 days later.
Yeah, they would have been. Yeah, I think we'd be talking about how many people died on January 6th. But unfortunately, they did not come in with ARs. Oh my God, what a disaster that would have been.
It would have been just like, okay, here's the teams of guys who are far scarier than you can imagine. And it would have just been a sweep. I mean,
yeah.
Earlier, that's because it's blurring
liberties that say that section or that the 14th Amendment is self-executing as long as its terms are met. It does not require any ancillary legislation.
Right, but as I think I expressed earlier, that's because it's blurring civil liberties. So that's why I.
But you don't have a basis for that. There's no textual
basis for that. I'm saying it's common sense dictates that cannot apply.
That's right.
Yeah, but common sense also says you can't. No, common sense also says you can't strip me of my basic liberties. That's the whole point.
So that's what I'm saying. It's not based on. It's based on your intuitions about common sense.
I think real quick. Yeah. So real quick, I think the issue is that like it feels like wait, real quick.
I'll answer you, shall if you like.
Wait, real quick, also because we kind of loop around this argument a little bit, and Pisco opened the conversation saying like, if it's in the Constitution, we have to enforce it, right? Because it's like a founding document. I agree with you, Good Logic, and I had arguments early on with this that like a lot of this seems kind of silly or unsatisfying, but that's not a good argument, right? Like it might be the case that it's poorly written, or it might be the fact that it's self-executing is like dumb, or it should be a different way. But we're not arguing what it should be or what the best way for it to be would be. It's how is it written and what does the actual law itself say? So I don't think the argument that like, damn, should the state Supreme Court really be making these determinations or whatever? That's not like, I don't think it's a satisfying way to evaluate it. We have to see what the Constitution says and then kind of go from there, work from there, right?
Well, I'll tell you, Destiny, that few lawyers who are worth their own salt would ever express an opinion that the Constitution is poorly written. You had the sharpest legal mind of the day, literally arguing about word by word as to what word would be the best word to be used for to express the sentiment that they were agreeing to. So I don't think Pisco.
Well, aside from potentially criminal Sean, but a few
it's
other.
Okay, Joe. I still love you.
I would also say that there are some places that are badly written.
Joe,
tell me which part of the Constitution do you think is poorly written?
Second Amendment. I already said. Why did you put a preamble in there, you idiots?
Yes. Well,
I think to them it was obvious that's not any.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is that lots of bad legal writing comes from the fact that it's like, to us this is obvious, not realizing the fact that
But that
it's
also
gotta
could be a
apply to
change.
other people.
That could be a change. That could be a change in writing that based on how people write 250 years ago versus today. That's not a criticism of their writing of the day.
There is some of that too in terms of like what we define as a militia, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, Joe, I'll tell you what I tell future Mrs. Martin 2.0. You're allowed to be wrong sometimes. It's okay.
Pisco or any lawyer would ever say this was poorly written, which is why.
Well, there are a
every
couple
word-
clauses that could
Well,
be more.
hold on. I'm sorry. When we say poorly written, I mean it's going to depend on what you mean by poorly written.
Poorly written.
Because
Yeah.
I could argue from an English language point of view that if I can give you a text and there are multiple interpretations, by default that text is poorly written. And by definition, our Constitution requires an ultimate determination and or interpretation. And we just literally had a watershed decision like Roe v. Wade reinterpreted by other people in the Supreme Court. So it seems to be the case that we can argue whether it's well written or not, or if a well-armed militia is an important part of keeping a gun or not. But I mean, like clearly, at the very least, we can say that it's written ambiguously enough that some parts are open to widely different interpretations, and that's why we have it in the first place.
I'd agree with this. It should have just been written
Okay,
as
so
the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Full stop. No excuses.
Yeah, that certainly would have solved a lot of issues. Although it seems as if from the limited times that the Supreme Court has weighed in on it, that is kind of how they read it. It's just a matter of, as Sean pointed out, there's what it says, and your legal right, and then there's the execution or attempts to infringe. So that we have a hard time unyoking ourselves from those shackles. So
you're asking a great question, and I don't think you want me to start getting into a whole debate about Roe v. Wade and Dobbs. I don't.
No,
think-
because
I don't think-
I'd like you to give me an
it's
answer
an
to my
example.
question before because I'm gonna have to go here in
What,
about 20 minutes.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying to you is the words that are chosen are precise. Now, does that mean that they cannot be interpreted in different ways? Of course, any word in the English language can be interpreted in different ways, and words evolve over time
Yeah.
to mean very different things.
Mhm.
So what words meant in 1868 are very different than what they mean today in many contexts, and how and the implications of those terms and that's a large part of the reason. And what is considered freedom and what's considered restrictive and what's considered, these are all things that do change culturally over time. So I agree with you that that's why we have a Supreme Court. And I think that the language that's being used does have sufficient flexibility, arguably, to say that, you know what, this is designed to basically give us some sort of idea as to what is considered restrictive under the perspectives of the day. And that was part of the brilliance of having amendments and things being able to change, is a recognition that sometimes the entire idea that we're expressing in this amendment might need to be altogether scrapped because the cultural attitudes of the day are dictated. And when we're only going to scrap it if we know that there's a sufficient majority of Congress that says, yeah, this is just completely outdated today. So
Wait, what? Wait, I just want to make sure I understand that you're saying that we should ignore. Maybe I misheard you.
you probably did.
Are you suggesting that if there's a sufficient majority of Congress that thinks this is outdated, that we shouldn't follow it?
You can change amendments, I'm saying. That's why they're called amendments.
Oh,
you
okay,
need
but
to-
not
you need
without
to
an
have,
amendment.
you need to have a supermajority of Congress in order to do so, and that's the reason why it has to be a
I
supermajority.
think a supermajority of the states to ratify
but
as well.
Yeah, but it's not like you're saying that we should ignore it if.
No,
I
of
don't
course
know,
not.
Pulse is
Definitely
one.
not. No,
Okay.
I'm about hardcore constitutions.
Yeah.
I'm like
That's good.
I'm like
That's
basically-
So I'm gonna redirect it. So since you pulled the 14th Amendment up, the language up, can we go back to the
You want me to go back
language of
to
Section
shall
3?
thing?
Yeah.
You want me to go back to your shall thing? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, what it means is if someone is labeled as falls into this disqualification, once that happens, you cannot enable this person to be a senator or a representative in Congress or an elected. Once this leprosy type of disqualification hits that person, they can no longer serve unless Congress by a 2/3 majority removes that leprosy for the Section 3 14th Amendment.
Getting biblical here.
That's what shall means in this context. But then the question is, how is someone determined to have this leprosy?
Right. And I think that that's a perfectly legitimate question. But my understanding, again, as a layman, of what your argument was this Section 3 is inoperative until Section 5, which says the Congress shall have the power, which, by the way,
Yeah,
doesn't
because
say
you need to have a
shall
determination.
enforce by appropriate legislation. It says shall have the power, which seems pretty permissive to me. The Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. So my understanding of what your argument is until Congress enacts some sort of federal mechanism to determine insurrection, be it like some sort of criminal conviction or like some sort of like insurrection board within Congress, Section 3 is inoperative. It cannot be satisfied. It just ceases to be until Congress avails itself of Section 5.
It's impossible. I'm going to ask you right now. Okay, take Trump out of this. Put yourself back in 2017. I'm going to ask you to put yourself back in 2020 and 2010.
Well, can you answer my question first? I'm not like ridiculing your argument. I'm trying to get a yes or no answer.
I know you're not. I am. Yes, I agree. I agree with the sentiment that you just expressed.
Okay.
And the reason I think that must be true is because there's no way to know what yardsticks apply. There's no way to know if there's a dispute as to whether or not someone engaged in insurrection, as we have today. Okay, what is the appropriate yardstick? Is it there are different yardsticks that we have at hearings. Okay, so if you go into a civil court, you have to show by preponderance of the evidence, which most people interpret to be 50.0001% more likely in your favor than the plaintiff's favor.
Right, in criminal, it's beyond all reasonable doubt, etc., and so forth. They're different.
And then there's a middle yardstick of clear and convincing evidence, which is somewhere between the 97% that most people attach to beyond reasonable doubt and the 50%. So what standard does someone? How far? I kind of think he did. Is that enough? If you say a gun to my head, I'll follow that, but I'm not positive that he engaged in insurrection. Is that enough that this person is disqualified? I'll ask you right now. Ask yourself whether a reasonable person could say that preponderance is enough, and a different reasonable person could say preponderance is not enough. In which case, it's. You agree with me that?
No, I agree that reasonable people. I agree that reasonable people can disagree about that, and that's why the lower court did by both.
That's why there has to be a federal determination. That's exactly why the legislature has to decide what that yardstick is.
And
he doesn't even realize when he's admitting to the emptiness of his own perspective.
Evidence, but my point is, your argument with respect is ridiculous. They don't put a yardstick for Section 3. They also don't give a yardstick for the Equal Protection Clause, right? They don't give they don't expound on what the standard should be for equal protection. They don't say what classes of people, what kind of burdens would apply. They don't expound and give a yardstick for the due process clause. Those are clauses that are way more broad and way more general than this. And so your whole argument that
and it took us hundreds of years to sort this out.
Yeah, exactly. That's precisely.
We still have 14th Amendment arguments about due process.
Too complex to actually put into an amendment. There's still arguments about whether the 14th Amendment covers abortion, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
They're weak sauce arguments, but there's still people making the arguments.
Yeah.
Absent congressional legislation, because what metric could courts use to decide these cases? It flies in the face of the other provisions of the 14th Amendment, which are more general and more ambiguous than this Section 3.
Also, is Pisco arguing the 14th Amendment is overbreadth and vague?
The 14th Amendment is so much more logical, isn't it? It's so much more logical than
I think it's illogical. I think it's illogical.
No, the reason it's logical,
Steven. Well, let me. I want to ask before I head out here, because Steven's the only other non-lawyer here, so I'm curious. Steven, where are you on this? Based on the 14th Amendment, do you think that the amendment requires Congress to create some sort of additional legislation for Section 3 to go into effect, or is it basically?
It's I need to hear from the only other non-lawyer here on this, because
Daddy Destiny, will you tell me?
Yeah,
you tell me when I want to hear Daddy.
Yeah, who do you think won this argument, Daddy?
He just dead on arrival until that happens.
The questions that I have, and I'm half paying attention to this. The problems that I have is the questions I had were is a thing clearly defined in terms of the insurrection bit? Is that clearly defined anywhere, or is this up for interpretation?
No, that's one of the things they debated. Listen, I live streamed all 5 days of the hearing. Mm-hmm. I live streamed the arguments, and one of the things that they hotly debated is, and both sides hotly debated, is what's the definition of insurrection, and Scott Gessler, who argued for Trump, came forward, and he basically was like, and it's a really tough question to understand exactly what an insurrection
He
is.
didn't even give a definition.
It's more than a riot. He struggled to give one. He said it's definitely more than a riot. It's definitely more than a riot, and it certainly seems like it's less than a rebellion.
Yeah,
Well,
so my issue, so my issue is one is I don't know what the definition or what insurrection is, and it seems like pretty important if we're talking about this particular thing, especially because in my opinion,
and I tell you something, Destiny's making a fair point here. He's like, we're all sitting here, and we're sort of almost dancing around like key terms here, which are just rudimentary as to understanding how this thing is supposed to be impacted. And if we don't know what a term means, then how the hell are we supposed to? Now we're going to sit here saying who's the arbiter of defining that term. That's essentially what I'm arguing with Pisco about, is who's the appropriate arbiter, and can a state possibly be the appropriate arbiter of that?
Opinion, my non-legal opinion, like in really vital aspects of freedom of speech for politicians is at play here, incredibly vital ones. That's the first thing, is what is an insurrection? And then the second thing would be, if we had like a legal definition of insurrection, insofar as however we defined it, ultimately, what does the body look like that determines whether that threshold has been met? Those are like the two really important things for me. So if both of these were like spelled out clearly, for instance, if we say like an insurrection is anything that involves treason, sedition, or whatever that third one is, right? And if the way that it's resolved is ultimately, well, the Supreme Court, I guess, will hear matters of eligibility for state ballots or something. I don't know what the process, like if these two things are like clearly called out, then I would have a stronger opinion on it. But my biggest fears are just that those two aspects are largely left, it feels to me like incredibly undecided, which means that whether or not Trump gets on the ballot could ultimately depend on the political composition of the Supreme Court, which is incredibly fucking terrifying to me. I don't like that. That's my.
I'll tell you this much. I'll tell you this much. My gut says I don't think this is going to be a 6-3 overturn. I think this is going to be at least 7-2, and it's more likely to be 9-0 than
no
it is.
shot.
I'm serious. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why politically. Okay, forget about legal rationale for a second. If we assume that all 9 of these justices are motivated by their own political driven issues, which I tend to assume the worst of people. So maybe you call me a cynic or whatever. I tend to assume the worst of them. Okay, so and I know I've done law for long enough to know that you can rationalize any decision you want to.
Sure.
Oh, this is where I was fading out.
Did he cut out on us?
Yeah, he's lagging out a little.
Yeah,
they got him.
Oh, I didn't realize this is where I cut out.
Like
oh no.
Yeah.
No.
Ah well.
It sounds like what's happening is your thing is dying or running out of batteries. If you're using like a Bluetooth headset, that's kind of what it sounds like, but I can't tell.
I wasn't using Bluetooth though.
Well, while he figures that out, Steven, so my understanding is.
So I never got back in after this. I tried getting back in. I couldn't find the right channel. I'm like bouncing around there, and I don't know. I was just
there's a lot going on in Destiny's Discord.
Oh my gosh, it's craziness. It's like I felt like all of a sudden I was in Toonland, and there's like over here is like the chocolate volcano, and over there is the sparkle feathers, and I'm like, I don't know what's happening here. I don't know what's happening here.
You started talking about Discord, and I'm just like, oh no, Joe, no.
That's the only way I get in there.
You're a brave man for navigating through that.
That's the only way I get in there. And when I started, I was like, can you guys hear me? Am I on? Am I in here? I don't even know if I'm in here. If this is something else. Yeah. So yeah, I was very, very confused. And when I tried getting back in there, I couldn't find the room again. I left, and then I tried coming back in, and I couldn't find the room again. So
well, you get the internet medal for bravery. You did a good job.
Anyway, yeah. So that was I thought, I felt guilty because when I was like, I had been in there for like 40 minutes, and I was like, oh my gosh, I never notified locals that I was in here. I feel really terrible about this. So I sort of put in my back of my mind that I was going to watch it with my audience here so that they could see it. But and if you subscribe to goodlogic.locals.com, you do get notices as to when I appear in different places. This was a unique circumstance because I was nervous that I was going to fall off from the Discord if I tried opening up a locals and I had no idea how to share any of this stuff. So I apologize that I did not give a timely notice, but that is a reason to sub up there. It's goodlogic.locals.com. Where can people find you, Mr. Runkle, this Christmas season if they want to find you?
I'm at Runkle of the Bailey. I'm going to be streaming tomorrow. It's just going to be a casual kind of hangout kind of thing. People asked if I'd do something, so I was like, yeah, sure. And other than that, I'm going to be covering a lot of Bill C-21, so the new gun restrictions in Canada,
Sweet.
which might actually get me killed, like literally. That is,
I hope it does not. That would be terrible.
yeah, I hope not, but you never know. And
Man's got to have
also,
aspirations.
well, there's a provision that allows any person in Canada to basically SWAT me.
Yeah.
So they built that into the
Nationwide red
law.
flag, yeah.
Are you serious?
Yep.
Yeah, any person can go in and bring an ex parte application to have somebody else banned from having guns, and
Wow.
with a tactical team raid to go get them.
Oh my
Like the court
God.
can direct a raid.
You have to move. You have to move.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's oh, and the best part, you don't even get to discover who brought it. That can all be sealed. So it's like, because I might want revenge. It's like, well, no, I'd actually just like to fight my court case. That'll have
face
after that.
Face your accuser.
Yeah. Like I just like disclosure of what exactly I've been, accused of. Like that would be good.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I'm also covering some funny court cases, funny lawsuits, because with all of that being super doom and gloom, you need a little bit of amusement just to keep sane. So, yeah.
Wow. I can't even. So when this law has gone into effect already by you?
Yep. They've banned handgun transfers. They've all sorts of things. So,
So I'll ask you the question that was asked to me last night. At what point, because I keep saying it's not time to get violent. It's not time to get violent. It's not time to get violent. At what point do you think that we've crossed the Rubicon, and it's like you can't.
I'm not sure.
You can't say
answer that question, Joe.
Law Society will not let me answer that one.
Well, just in general, I don't think that's good for him because he would get a knock on his door for that.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's true. He's in Canada.
I mean, there is clearly a point, like in the sense that I had relatives who took up arms against the Nazis in World War II,
Mhm.
and I think that they did the right thing.
Right.
But there's a lot of room between, and so, and the other problem
I keep
is,
saying we're a long way from there. We're a long way from there. Like people shouldn't think that like, oh, the next thing that happened. No. We're a long way from there. But they're definitely
the problem is that it's always, whenever you see like the downfall of a country, it's always faster than people expect. And so there's never a time when it's appropriate until it's too late.
Yeah.
And that just is what it is. I don't think anybody, because if you're sitting there trying to predict where things are going, you will inevitably do that too soon. And then you just end up in trouble. So it's not a good question to sort of answer. But I mean, if you're at the point where they're like rounding people up and shooting them in the street, then it's, then it's time. Probably time sometime before then, but
right. Probably some point before that.
Yeah, it's just yeah. As somebody says, if they're trying to put you on a train, maybe it's time to.
Yeah, but that's it's like driving around and you put tape over your gas gauge. When is the right time? I don't know. You'll know. It's like when you're out of gas. Well, it's too late, and before then, you're like, well, I don't need to.
Yeah, that's exactly it. There isn't really a good time, and
you'll know. You'll like that. That's the thing. Like you'll know.
Well, and also I weigh like 140 pounds. I am not the lead on any of this. I'm the guy who
said,
like,
I would say just for your own well-being, I'd probably leave it there.
Yeah,
I can talk all the Minecrafty stuff for you. Don't worry.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be. You don't have to. To do Minecraft worthy things. You don't have to be. Chad McIron Man. I'm just saying.
Oh,
it helps, but you could do whatever.
Before I get to you, Sean, Trump was tried for this in the Senate and acquitted. Also, whoever wins 2024 needs to issue a pardon for any and all people charged and listened to J6, both current and any future. FBI equals traitors. Yes.
I was actually really surprised Trump didn't.
He got cucked by his people in charge. I'm sure they said oh, you can't. For the same reasons why Assange was never pardoned, Snowden wasn't pardoned. A lot of people he was very much, you know, for being as independent as he is, I'm sure he was basically
Here's another
people
point
were telling
also.
him what to do,
Here's another
and
point.
he was, yeah.
Just go for the base thing. I pardon every American.
But that's exactly
Yes.
the question I was going to ask. That's exactly
And
the
suddenly
question.
the prisons are like, you what?
Yeah.
Mike, well, my question is, does the president? I know we say his pardon power is plenary,
Yeah.
but does that extend to pardoning a class of people without
Yes.
knowing their names?
Yes. The draft dodgers
absolutely.
were pardoned.
What?
The draft dodgers were pardoned.
Oh, that's a good point.
I mean, why can't I? Anybody who was involved in January 6th, everybody who committed the crime of, you know, cheese pizzas, like you wouldn't want to do that one, but you could commit, like anybody who's illegally made a machine gun is hereby pardoned. Anybody who has XYZ in his custody is pardoned. There is no, I mean, like, I don't have to know specifically who it is. It helps, but I could say, like, you know, anybody who's ever done this act is hereby pardoned.
Just say I hereby pardon every American and watch the chaos.
Oh God, that would be awful. Well, there'd be a lot of self-regulating if that happened.
Sean, where can people find you?
You can find me at Potentially Criminal on YouTube, over on Locals, Rumble, Twitter, Twitch, and yeah, where else? Hold on. Oh, the Book of Faces as well.
The Book of Faces.
Facebook.
Oh, okay. All right. So that is our show. I'm going to be landing the plane relatively quickly over here. So I'm going to wish all you who are still enjoying Christmas to enjoy the remainder of your Christmas. I think there's probably a handful of you on the West Coast who still have like a half-hour Christmas left. Or if you consider this whole season to be Christmas and you want to take a Merry Christmas from me, I'm offering it to you right here and now. Merry Christmas, and to both of you gentlemen as well. I thank you so much for joining me. And I should be back here, God willing, tomorrow evening. Until then, I'm going to urge y'all to make sure that, you know, life is rough, but stay happy, eat some bugs, and as always, Godspeed.